news flash, not fake news.
Say something about it, Pete. What do you think?
It was great.
All right, good. Moving on.
Are you okay?
My soul.
Devil's in the system, guys.
We need to stop and pray. Good evening and welcome to The Brook on Canaan Radio. It's good to be back again this week. Took us a couple extra minutes because just like that intro,
The devil's
in the system, guys. We need to stop and pray. It's good to be back again. New episode, and we've got a guest today, but it's good to see you, Brother David.
Good to be here.
Pastor Reeves.
I like it.
And then Mrs. Reeves has joined us today. We're going to have to get her mic a little bit closer. She's a little bit shorter, but that doesn't make her any less feisty. And then up in the booth, we've got Brother Peter up there and Brother JT. Got them both, and we're going to see if we can, we call it the peanut gallery. I'm just kidding. We're going to get right into, we're getting right into things. I'm going to move your mic a little bit, Mom. Get you set. I was so busy trying to fix things that, there. It's going to be way up in there. Way up there. There we go. Doing something new this week. And exciting. We're trying to live stream to all of our social media accounts except Twitter, which right now is just Elon Musk has done craziness with it.
YouTube's working.
YouTube's working. I'm looking right at it.
Oh, okay.
I'm behind.
Mine's not. Okay.
It's working.
It's working.
Yep.
It's working on mine.
We're also on Facebook. Yep. Facebook. And Instagram for all the grammars. All you Instagrammers.
The live stream is out there.
But it's good to be together today. There we go. I wasn't sure if the cameras were working properly or not. It's always a mad dash to try and run around and get everything put together. And when you add something new into the mix, it makes things crazy. So,
if you were listening before the broadcast started, you probably heard us running around talking in here. How long ago was that? About 20 minutes ago? Mm-hmm. The audio was still being pushed through on accident.
We had we added a microphone so that we'd have Brother Peter up in the booth, and I forgot to switch off that. If
you go up there,
we all nodded when he explained it, and we're like,
yeah,
yep.
Honestly,
Right.
if you go up there in the booth, there's a million wires going every which way. It's going into the ceiling, through the floor, down. I mean, it's a mess. It's amazing that anything works, to be honest.
All off camera.
Yes.
You know what,
pretty
though?
much.
It's really not that bad.
Yeah, but it sounds cool.
Sure. Yep.
Why is it doing that?
Click the one that says live. Down, down, down. There you go. There you go.
Be patient with
Oh, yeah. Well, you know how they have those jitterbug phones? We need to get a jitterbug computer for Dad. It's just got like 3 buttons on it.
Well, I don't know what that other thing was. It was the same show, but it was...
I don't even know what it was
It
either.
looked different.
I don't know what it was.
But,
No idea.
So, get us going.
I did. You guys have been sitting.
Wow.
Dad's been sitting there staring at his laptop.
He's been trying to figure out
How's this
YouTube.
thing working over here?
It's a great day. It's a great day. Unfortunately, it was cold today. But we're supposed to get back up into the 50s tomorrow and the rest of the week, I believe. We had, it was 70 degrees. The sign outside said 77. I don't think it got that hot, but 70 degrees on Wednesday. And then we got some snow on Thursday. We didn't get 3 inches like it said, but we did get enough to cover the grass.
It was moist.
Moist.
Moist grass.
But the sun was shining today. Very sunny.
Yes. It was a little bit windy, but it was nice.
Kind of a sharp breeze.
I'm just glad to be invited back for another show.
Who invited you?
Himself.
We got to have the producer
Yes,
here.
that's right. I brought some candy. I got distracted with all the issues we were having and didn't get a chance to open all these beforehand. So
Now it's
Wouldn't be good to do right now.
Here, go ahead.
We got Airheads.
Open it all at once. Everybody get it out of the way.
We should do a poll.
Get it open.
What's your favorite candy? Here, this is yours. You
Get it
love
open.
these.
Yeah, get that open out of there.
That's great.
Bites. Resealable bag.
ASMR, Pastor. We'll call it annoying ASMR.
What's ASMR?
Really, Mom?
Audio sensory.
And that my favorite one's not only is it noisy.
what is
I don't even know.
but it's
Now I gotta look it
All
up.
over the place.
It's basically where they just like are really.
See, making fun of me not knowing, but you didn't even
Who made fun of you, Mom?
know. You.
What? How did I make fun of you?
Said
are
really,
these?
Mom? Somebody said really, Mom.
No, that was
Was that
David.
you, David?
I can neither confirm nor deny. Airhead candy.
They don't have
Autonomous sensory meridian
Want some?
response.
Sure. Seal it up. Send them up. We'll munch on them. Yeah.
No, nobody heard it. Okay,
This is Swedish
coming your way.
fish.
Mom.
Sorry, what is
I'm telling you
I
what
don't
it
know,
means,
doesn't
Mom.
really say. Airhead bites.
Autonomous sensory meridian response is a tingling sensation that usually begins in the scalp and moves down the back of the neck and upper spine.
So it's spine chills? That's it?
It has been compared with auditory tactile synesthesia.
When you get that weird, no, your
It's like you get the shivers.
Yeah, it's just
Ooh,
shivers.
shivers.
Who needs to put an ASMR? Never mind.
It's good to have everybody joining us on the live stream.
Yeah, say hi to everybody.
Got
We
sours.
got Jewel, Christy, Courtney, Kaylee, or Kathy, Emily, Hope. Oh, wait, did I say Hope already? No. Brother Tyson. Hey, Brother Tyson, if you're actually listening, good to have you join at the beginning of the show and at the end.
Wow.
Sick burn.
Sick burn. Yeah.
Mindy Wells.
Oh, you
Mrs.
guys got the
Smith,
good ones.
Miss Minnie Wells, the McCarrolls.
Back down.
Gabe.
Mariah.
Gabe is stalking us. He keeps sending me messages. I'm ignoring him. Block.
There's something about my adult children that they love messing with my OCD. Let's bring a whole bunch
Candy.
of candy.
I think OCD is probably the wrong
And we could hear chewing.
what would
and
be called?
ADHD.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
Right in the.
We're going to have to do some parenting on purpose here.
Just so you know, everybody, if Facebook is your app of choice, you can watch on Facebook, you can watch on Instagram, and you can watch on YouTube.
Who's watching on Instagram or Facebook?
Yeah, who's watching on who's watching? We got one viewer on Facebook right now. We got
Who is it?
Bob.
Expose them.
we got one on
Bob.
Instagram.
Bob. I just threw a name.
I'm
out there.
gonna put a comment. I'm gonna check in, fam. How about that?
Hey, we got an announcement
Good. My comments aren't working.
concerning Camp Patmos. We don't have the date yet, but we are going to have paintball camp this year.
Yeah, that's exciting.
I'm excited about that. Come and get shot. That's how we're going to advertise it.
Shoot or be shot.
We'll provide the frozen paintballs.
Yes.
Ouch.
Yeah. I'm excited about that. It's
Who wouldn't want a frozen?
a couple days of tournaments and
Church against church.
yeah. Yep.
Pastor against pastor.
They don't want to go against me.
Youth pastors against their...
That's because you cheat.
I don't. How do you cheat at paintball?
I don't know, but you figured out.
You get a semi-automatic gun when everyone else has
semi.
No, a full auto. Yeah, that's right. He's got full auto.
17 rounds a second.
Yeah. So
That's what it sounds
You're
like.
Maybe it's
professional.
not cheating. Maybe it's unfair advantage.
I don't need all of those extra stuff. I just need one, just like a sniper.
JT, can you give Mrs. Reeves' mic an extra notch?
It's fine. I just keep moving.
I want you to be comfortable. So.
Gabe, you know how good of a shot I am. Don't even act like that. I was a sick player on the
Mrs. Bennett
basketball
joined
court.
Oh my goodness. Sick as in garbage.
Yeah.
Who joined?
Miss Bennett.
Ms. Bennett. Very good.
Brother Tyson said, Reeves parenting. Let them eat candy.
I want to give them the
cannot
opportunity to say, not allowed to have any more.
We cannot take responsibility for this. They are adults and out of the house.
You going to announce my traveling itinerary?
Oh, yeah, you do that.
Yes. Announcing the itinerary. Pastor William Reeves. No, Pastor starting and Mrs. Reeves are starting to travel for the ministries here, really for Great Plains Baptist College. And they will be at 3 different churches is it next week?
Yes.
Next week, right?
Yeah.
On Sunday morning, Sunday night, and Wednesday night. And they'll be at Amazing Grace Baptist Church in Wichita, Kansas on Sunday morning, and then Bethel Baptist Church in Wichita
Kansas.
on Sunday night. And then Ray Avenue Baptist Church in Salina, Kansas on Wednesday night.
Is it Selena or Selina?
Salina.
It probably is Selena.
With Pastor Day. And we're looking forward to that. I mean, you are looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to you being gone.
That means I will not be in for next Saturday's show, but it is the topic next week is
It's good.
church kids.
Oh, church kid problems. Church kid challenges.
Church kid challenges. That's what
Church kids are problems. That's for sure.
something like that. But we're going to have other guests, and this table will be packed out with church kids.
Oh yeah.
To give their assessment.
Oh, it's going to be intense.
It's going to be a short show because we'll start it off. All our problems as parents.
All right, that's it.
Next on.
And with that, party. I'm just kidding.
Actually, next week, JT, would be a good time for you to give your testimony. He asked me.
Yeah, he asks you.
He asked me about that today, and I think it's good. He's got a viewpoint, and so work that in next week. Give him an opportunity, maybe
Right at the end, 30 seconds, get it done?
45 seconds. Be generous.
Okay, 45 seconds.
But give him some time.
Yeah.
Fit it in.
Just so you know, it is Salina.
Really?
Yep.
I've always said it wrong.
S-A-L
But I don't live there, so.
E-Y-E for pronunciation. I.
Salina.
Hey,
Selena
Steve.
sounds cooler.
Nah.
Did you fail to say hi to Joe Crawford?
Brother Crawford.
Hi, Brother Crawford. I don't remember if I mentioned you.
Okay,
I did
all
not.
right.
No,
Okay.
yeah, because I stopped at Mrs. Smith. I didn't even say Miss Diane. Or Diana, I'm sorry. I think that's everybody. That matters anyway.
It's like the subplot going over here on the little slivers of 1 and 2 on the screen. I took out some candy. I get the death stare. I smile back at him like, and he just looks at me like,
I brought you into the world. I'll take you out. You'll be the death of me.
So tell us what kind of progress you made on the building over there. The new church
Pete,
auditorium.
tell us about that.
tell us about
We
it.
made progress.
Oh man.
All right, that's it. I'm just kidding.
I think I still feel my knees.
Let's see, this week,
Give Pete,
basically...
give Pete camera there.
Camera. Oh, I don't want to be on camera. It's bad enough with my voice. This week, we patched up some holes in the wall. There was a couple of windows that we had taken out that were leading into the auditorium, just distractions, but got them sealed up. Started mudding those up to get them ready for texturing, and then we painted most of the auditorium and also the hallway out there. A bunch of other little things that got done. Started painting trim and stuff like that, but still a lot to do, but it's progressing. It's beginning to look a lot better.
Yes.
Yes.
So carpet goes in next week, right?
That is currently the plan.
I love it. I love it. That's currently the plan.
Plans change. We would like to have the carpet in next week. That would be awesome.
I don't know what was more annoying. Pulling the carpet out or having to walk around on top of that
Oh, I know.
sticky
right?
glue for the
No,
last couple
pulling
days.
it out was definitely more.
I don't know.
Yeah, that was definitely more.
Painting all the trim. If you stayed in any one spot longer than 30 seconds,
You lost your
your
shoes.
shoes
I
were
couldn't
stuck.
get. Yeah, I'd pull my feet right out of my shoes.
It did draw my attention. I didn't realize how much when you're painting, or like even if in a small area, how much you move around. Like you really do move your feet just to get in
And
the
it's
little
like-
areas. And it's like, you go to move and you trip because your foot stays
Yeah.
stuck to the floor.
Yeah.
So it's like you go to move and you face plant into a freshly painted wall.
So last week we pulled the carpet, and we used my 4-wheeler to assist because it has a winch on it. And I had a Polaris. I bought it in 2020, and I think there was only 40 hours on it, and literally could not get it to come out of gear, and it just wouldn't shift. I had to turn it off to put it back in. So I traded it off this week, and now I got a 2-seater. So Mom can ride with me now.
Maybe the wheels got
Hey,
glued.
Bud, you want to go ride?
No,
Come on, man.
no,
Sure.
never again.
Tell everybody why not.
They've heard this story, but I'll tell it again gladly because it really does explain my childhood.
I'm pretty sure you were like 24.
Exactly, that's the problem.
I just want you to know I did it on
I
purpose.
didn't learn my lesson my
you
entire
didn't.
life.
You didn't because I believe that very time he asked me, "Hey, you want to ride?" And I was like, "You're driving? No, I'm good, thank you."
That's what I said first. He's like, no, come on, it'll be all right. It'll be fun. It'll be fun, he said.
It was fun.
It'll be fun. You'll have a good time.
Memorable.
Yeah, it was memorable. That's for
Let's
sure.
just say when he picked himself off the bottom of the lake.
And then got smashed back into the bottom of the lake because the four-wheeler fell on top of me. There's this little corner. This
No-
corner
no
as
harm,
you
no
head
foul.
to.
You weren't broken.
It could have been worse, but it's a good thing I'm tough.
Don't forget
And I
to
come around I was on the back of the four-wheeler.
padded.
I
and
made you
Pastor's-
tough.
Sure. Pastor's driving the four-wheeler, and we come around this corner. And I'll never forget there were actually people out in a boat, and they like to just anchor right off the edge of the lake over there.
They had
And
a
I
good
remember
show.
I'm holding on with both hands on the back there. There's no handles. This is that sport one that you
Yeah.
had before. There's no handles. It's just you're just holding on.
And you go.
You're going crazy.
He's careening.
He goes
around.
around. He goes around the corner, and there's probably I think it's like a six. It used to be deeper, but it was like a 5.5, 6 foot like drop off, just where the dirt ends, and then it kind of slopes down to the beach. But the water's only about a foot deep, maybe right there. And I just remember we're going around the corner and we're up on 3 wheels and then 2 wheels and then no wheels and I just
Superman!
I just go to dive. I'm like I gotta get and I jump off of that thing and I remember landing on my knees and hands and then I go to stand up and I'm like I'm alive. And no sooner did I stand up, the four-wheeler had flipped over backwards and it just smooshed the
Like a
seat right on top
cartoon.
of me, just right down in the boosh.
We both come out of the water and we look up.
And the
there's
guys are like-
those boats sitting there with all the people going, all right!
We're all drunk, but
Good
like-
show. Good show.
Yeah, that's back when Canaan Media had a phone, and I had both phones on me. It's like anytime Pastor says, "Hey, you want to go for a ride?"
This one's safer though. It has this holding bars, has a back.
Which means he's going to be even more ferocious. So
He'll kill someone for sure.
Nope,
No.
nope. Not
I
doing
can
it.
understand
I won't do it.
you have a child now. You have to be a more
That doesn't matter. A child or not, I'm not doing it. It doesn't matter.
those days are gone.
Sissy.
Excuse me.
Huh?
I didn't say nothing.
The pastor's. He's one of these guys where if you get him, it's like a big deal. Like we've had times where you scared pastor, and it's like
You're gonna die.
You're fired. You know what?
guys-
Are we telling stories?
it's over.
Guys
Okay,
act
so
like I'm
Dad
a
is-
woman, man. That's not even right.
Dad's the type of guy where he loves scaring everybody else, but if you scare him, he's just
All of
he's
me-
not
look,
happy
you
about
can-
it.
I'm not happy.
Don't touch
but-
me.
Listen, here's the thing. It's not so much that I don't like it.
Yeah,
It's,
yeah.
it is, everybody knows that when you do something to me, you are opening the door for my
The door's always open.
for
though.
my return reaction.
But the door's always open. You're gonna have it at some point.
There's 2 things I learned
We're gonna
growing
get
up
it.
not to do: tickle his feet
Okay.
because he get hit in the head with his foot, and scaring him. 2 things I just learned not to do.
And pastor's always had these lightning fast reflexes. It was last week. Last week, I don't know. I was going to mess with you, and I'm like, he's on the 4-wheeler. And he's like, driving. He's got both hands up there, and I go to, I'm gonna walk by him and smack him in the rear end. That's what I was gonna do. But I'm telling you what, the fastest, whoa, he just gets that hand back there, and I'm like, my old man still got the reflexes.
Anybody reaching for my butt? I'm
Oh dear.
And we are on the air.
Yeah.
oh, you're one to talk.
Hey, family disloyalty.
That's
is coming
right.
Up. I'm
It's
looking forward to
coming.
that episode.
It's
Mrs.
coming.
Smith said the donut fight on the bus.
Yes.
Remember that?
That was epic.
That was within the first year or 2 of us being here, and she learned or didn't learn. I don't know. If you go.
Oh,
back
she
to
learned.
Pastor,
She has
Still a
never
little
done,
gray.
she's not crossed the line ever since.
full on donut fight.
She still says the
Food
reason it
fight
started
on the
was
bus.
not what the actual reason was.
What?
Well, it started because she
I
She was going to spray perfume on
she
him.
said it was,
It was
water.
water.
It wasn't water.
But she sprayed it on you, didn't she?
Yeah.
Did it
So
smell like
i-
perfume?
It smelled like perfume.
If you want to know what's going on here, so we were on our way. It was a Six Flags trip.
No.
Track meet.
Track meet, and we were in
Next
we
best
were,
thing.
we were in a
I mean, who goes
bus.
to a track meet and leaves with donuts.
Well,
Krispy
I don't
Kreme
even know
donuts.
how did we get so many donuts because I remember them being
He
shoved
worked
up
someone
to
worked
the
it.
sides of the
He's-
bus
he worked
like
it.
stacks.
Did he work there?
Yeah, and he got
Why
free.
did you get so many? Like, what was your
Because I
plan?
had the boys' home.
Yeah.
we had the bus.
They were
and had
stacked.
all
We had
those
like
racks.
It was
600
so
donuts.
many.
Racks down the
was
side.
so
It was like
many
taking the
donuts.
boys home and 600
I can remember
donuts.
getting on the bus going like, that is just like,
That'd
are
be
we ever going to be able to
Okay.
eat all those?
50 dozens.
50 dozen?
Yeah,
50
That's
dozen.
that is
It was
so many
crazy.
dozen.
That's why I didn't care.
So many
There's no
donuts.
way you're going to eat all those donuts, you know. But the boys in the boys' home, man, they were
Well,
loving
you
it.
told
They were
Mrs.
loving
Smith
it.
not to spray it, and
Because they're jokesters and pranksters. Mrs. Smith and
But-
Pastor, they were, it was like brother sister thing, and they would go at it.
And it's-
Mrs. Smith had this little bottle of, the ladies like cover up their sweat stuff.
It's
It was
water.
like juice in a bottle.
Yeah.
She's like, I'm gonna spray you, I'm gonna get you.
and he said, if you do, I'm going to throw this donut at
Yeah,
you.
yeah, donuts.
Yeah, he had a donut in his hand.
I
And
was
she-
sticking up for you. I said, don't spray
That's
that on my
right.
boys.
Yeah.
They don't need to be smelling like a stinking feminine.
But you had
We'd be
gone
a
back
good
and told the
smelling
guys.
feminine.
You had told the guys. You said, guys, you get down a couple boxes of donuts.
I said,
you
"Lock
acted
and
like they
load,
were. You
fellas."
acted like they were about to eat them. You're
Yeah.
like, you just hang on to them. And you went back and you said, you spray that on them. You're gonna be sorry. And she goes, "Psst," and
I
he
hit her.
chucks the donut, a jelly-filled donut, and it goes everywhere. And it was on. And the
Her
guys
husband-
were taking bites of donuts and chucking them.
Her husband Chet was driving
Yeah.
the bus, and he's just sitting there, and donuts are flying
Hitting the
past
windshield.
hitting the windshield.
That
I
was
just
the
remember seeing.
messiest.
Yeah, I just
We had to stop and
remember.
spray out
It
the
was
bus.
so messy.
Yeah.
Very sticky.
What do you remember?
Sure.
I just remember donuts flying everywhere, and I was probably like 8.
Then they
like
got in the
8. I was just
cooler,
like, yeah.
and whatever leftover juice was getting dumped.
Juice.
Whatever
Yeah.
leftover juice was getting
And then
Oh man.
it was
where was the track meet at?
like
Lincoln.
Omaha, Lincoln.
Oh, okay.
Or Fremont.
So we had another
stopped in
3-hour
Lincoln, though,
drive.
didn't we? I thought we stopped
We
in.
stopped in Lincoln to spray the bus
spray
out.
the bus
by-
out.
down the road from that
Valentino's.
McDonald's.
Yeah, we sprayed the bus off
Oh, we didn't
way
have
too
Valentino's.
soon because then we were shivering. The rest of
Oh, it was awesome.
Yep.
everybody was wet.
Good times. Sometimes things happen only one time.
But you never forget it.
And you never forget.
Everything that happened was on purpose.
Right.
Somebody's purpose.
Okay, let's go to a song and we'll come back and start the main segment here. You can request a song during the show, 920-940-8275. Don't forget the final segment that we are doing this season. It is the third degree, which implies you need to give it to us. You need to let us have it. Ask questions.
Ask hard questions.
Hard questions. So you can text us those questions or you can post in the chat wherever you're listening, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, doesn't matter. Ask us difficult questions, and we'll get to those at the end of the show. First song we're going to play, The Value of One, Golden State Baptist College. This song was requested by Gabe. We'll be right back.
We are super excited to continue this year's theme of growing up IFB. And this week we're going to talk about parenting on purpose. And that's why my wife is in the studio. And we're going to talk about our parenting. And we're experts on our parenting because that's all we know. But it was interesting to me when I entered into the IFB to watch families in the church. I was always surprised at how many people at first glance seemed to be, they were great Christians, pictures of Christianity, and often they were lifted up into leadership at the church, and but they couldn't seem to produce children that lived for God, and that always dumbfounded me. When Jill and I started having discussions, really, when we were dating, we were engaged about raising our kids, we both agreed our desire was to succeed according to the Bible. And we both knew that we would have to be proactive and aware, and then communication would be a must. Jill started preparing for raising children way before I did, because I didn't come into Christianity really till later. Well, I was 15, but I never grew up in an IFB home or in church. But Jill did, and I'll let her tell a little bit about that.
So as a teen and into young adulthood, I had purposed in my heart to keep all of the godly truths that my parents had taught me from the Bible. At the same time, though, I was taking note of the things I struggled with as a young person. Even more impactful was watching my siblings struggle to get over stumbling blocks, frustrations, hurts, and temptations, and then watch them as they either chose to keep the faith of our Father or to discard it in one way or another. And as the second oldest of 6, just as our kids were being born, front and center were my friends, classmates, siblings choosing their life's direction. Some were choosing against the godly principles they had been taught. For me, this formed an overwhelming desire as a parent to build on what was good while proactively seeking how to avoid the pitfalls I'd seen. This was the main foundation of our constant conversations as a young couple and as new parents. And I'm thankful to my parents for the strong biblical foundation that they gave me, but I am so thankful to my husband for being able to bring new insights into how to approach and how to apply those truths instead of just discarding them. As we began parenting, I knew that would also include working on myself, because the last thing I wanted to be is the reason that my kids didn't choose to be a Christian.
And really, that's a lot in latter years you hear on social media and all the podcasts and things, the big source of tearing down what we believe in organized religion, your IFB, they're wanting to attack and tear down is a lot more complaints about how it's everybody else's fault. And we didn't have that when we first started looking at having kids, but we knew that we knew there had to be a better way. And I shared my testimony a little bit last week, and I grew up in a worldly home and I didn't have a balanced parenting opportunity, as far as my mom was the one that was the major one that all through my life, but then different men as fathers. But you had your dad and your mom, and they're a little bit different. You want to just talk about how that dynamic is, how it is, and then we'll talk about how we are.
Yeah, well, I was privileged to grow up into a Christian home. My mom and dad were actually saved around age 25, but when my mom was pregnant with me. So my mom actually got baptized while she was pregnant with me. So when I was born, my parents were in church, and when they got in church, they got in all the way, lock, stock, and barrel.
Your dad went to Tennessee Temple.
Yes, and then just in a couple years, my dad surrendered to preach, went to Tennessee Temple for a couple years, seminary, and then by the time I was 6, he was pastoring a church. So I grew up in a pastor's home, pretty much, mostly that's all I knew. Going to Christian school from the age of, I think first grade I went to Christian school, and then 4th on up. So it wasn't in our church, but it was a local Christian school. And so, I mean, I was surrounded by, church people and Christian parents, and so definitely grew up as an independent fundamental Baptist.
Would you say in your Christian school that a large majority of the kids, clearly as you viewed them, they were Christian kids, their parents were in those churches, and you're familiar with those churches from that area, but would you say that they were children that seemed to be focused on serving Christ? Or?
Well, the biggest struggle I had, of course, the Christian school I went to was large by most standards. I think there was 18 in my graduating class alone, so it was like a school of 300 kids. So, and they allowed kids to come from any different church background. But for the most part, the majority of the kids, both in my Christian school and even in my church, didn't have the same standards, weren't Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night Christians. I mean, so when I look at the kids that were surrounding me as I was growing up, it was not like there were sold out Christians I could be friends with. And I mean, my best friend, who has been here on the program, she came out of family. She decided as a teenager, partly because of our friendship and the discussions that we had, to give up her pants. So I mean, that shows you where the kids in my Christian school were at. Even though we had standards at school, by the time I graduated high school, our senior trip, the kids had gone mixed swimming together. So, I mean, that's kind of shows you where we might say it's independent fundamental Baptist, but even back then it was weak.
Right. And mixed swimming back then wasn't just fully clothed. It
No,
was,
I meant swimsuits.
Yeah,
In the
that's-
hotel swimming
Yeah.
pool.
Yeah. So anyway, when we knew we were getting married, we're getting engaged and getting married, we had serious talks about how we didn't want to lose our children and how we didn't want our children to hate God and or hate church. And so in order for us to actually facilitate good conversations, we took in a lot of what we saw. And that was looking at and sizing up pastors and pastors' wives and their kids when we went different places. And of course, you had already by that time been at House Anderson for 4 years, was fixing to go teach in Kalkaska, Michigan. And my quick assessment of Christianity's families lined up with what you have viewed your whole life. And so we both just kind of coveted together to make sure that didn't happen. And it always was, our marriage was first, and then our children. And we never felt like we had to put the ministry on hold, because part of raising our kids for God and parenting our kids was actually using the tool of the ministry in the same fashion. So, but I think the first thing I just will start off, it was of the utmost importance to us that our children get saved. And so we wanted to make sure that how we conducted ourselves around our children when it came to our salvation was we rejoiced in our souls being saved. And our testimonies were clear. Yours was, and of course mine was, just the stark difference of yours and mine, knowing that the kids were going to grow up in a Christian home. So it was still, I bet, a little bit amazing to them that I came from the background I did. But it was always giving God the praise for it, talking about how he knew where I was at, how he was doing things in my life to bring me to that point of decision. And just praising the Lord for that miracle of salvation. And then always wanted to show them that the reason we did what we did is because we love Jesus. We were very thankful.
Yeah, I think it was never a separation of being saved and then home life, and then we dropped home life to go serve Jesus.
Right.
It was vocalizing that God and serving Jesus was everything. Mm-hmm. So whether we were at home or whether we were at church or whether we were doing ministry stuff, it was always serving Jesus. That's just what you did with your life because you loved him, you're grateful, and all the many blessings and what we owed him for how much he's given us. And
all throughout life, I mean, from the start of our marriage, God's fulfilled Scripture through the whole thing. He that findeth a wife findeth a good thing and obtaineth favor. Even from the first step to go to college shortly after we were married, I think it's just 2 months after we were married, I went with $400, and God just opened door after door. And I've never seen anything like that in my life. And I was just convinced God was showing me favor. I was obtaining favor because I'd found a wife, a good thing. And we always had kept that in front of the kids. Always had kept constantly the miracle of the apartment and how things came to be. Every step of our life, our young life, we took mental note of what God had done, and we rehearsed it. And the Bible talks about rehearsing things. And we rehearsed it before the kids, and always would praise the Lord for that. But I think also we kept soul winning was a big heartbeat in our life, being part of the ministries of every church that we were in, and bringing folks to the knowledge of the saving power of Christ, that he will not only save you from hell, but he will save you from a wicked life, and he'll transform your life. And we also put an emphasis on the children to understand that even though you have a very clean life and protected life, that there is still a transformation that needs to take place in your life. And
that was really, really evident to me because that was my testimony. My testimony was, I was given everything as a child as far as a Christian home and given the Bible truths, but saw through the course of time what really happens if you don't choose it for yourself. If you don't make those decisions, it doesn't matter how great a Christian as your parents are.
I think that one of the challenges for me, like I said, very green compared to how much time you had spent in church and independent fundamental Baptist movement, was I knew that I was getting married to somebody that was spiritually 10 times better than I was. They probably forgotten more Bible than I'll ever know. And that was always an issue. And I appreciated my wife had the aspect of God put us together. He'll provide the wisdom that you need as you need it. But I was always felt a little bit insecure. But I believed very solidly that God would direct me and give me that wisdom. And but I also felt like I couldn't ignore how you felt about things or how you saw things. And so I always tried to see, when raising our kids, making decisions, I tried to really rely on how my wife saw her life with her parents through her eyes. She would share those stories with me.
Take
and
that
then,
experience.
Yeah, and then I would realize, okay, now I can't just be white and black sometimes. That's the way I am. It's right, wrong, da, da, da. I'm not going to argue over things. But with my kids, I had to realize that there's going to be some of that I've got to understand. And I most of the time didn't understand it, but I knew it was happening. And because of Jill's upbringing, and because I respected Pastor Brennan and Mrs. Brennan, what they had given Jill, that really equipped me to step back and be more thorough in giving thought to what they needed and how they saw life. But very important. Guys, you have anything to say about that first?
I think something that's interesting that I've been thinking about a little bit this week is I think one of the main factors for a lot of good Christian kids going away from the Lord and compromising what they know to be true is because they're not grateful. They're not thankful for what they've been given in the first place. And I know you mentioned that just a little bit when you were talking about how you weren't given that. You were not given a good home with two parents that faithfully not only loved each other but loved the kids and gave a good environment to their kids and took them to church. And then when you got married, I think you used the word rehearse, and you talked about how every time God did something, you talked about it. And I think as a Christian kid that's grown up in independent fundamental Baptist movement, I think one of the things that has helped me stay right, stay true to the Bible, to truth, has really been that gratefulness. And I think it's not just simply something that you just choose to do, choose to be grateful. I think it's something that happens as a result of your parents constantly putting in front of you why you should be grateful. I think a lot of times things happen, the Lord does things, and parents don't talk about it at home. Miracles happen, God provides in amazing ways, and it's just like, oh, okay, good, we needed that. But they don't stop and go, that was the Lord. I can remember so many times where something amazing happened, and you would look at us and you would say, that was the Lord right there. Mm-hmm. The Lord did that. And that caused me to think about all of the blessings that God has shed on me. And then too, I think it's also not just that, but also you're always sure to tell us that we have a responsibility. You kept that in front of us. You've been given a lot compared to what I had growing up.
Too much is given.
Luke 12:48, much shall be required. And not only should you be grateful, but you have a responsibility to not only not go away from what is right, but to do even better. You what was you saying growing up? 10 times better.
Yeah, you made a good point. I think in adjustment, as I view things, sadly, there probably wasn't a lot of miracles happening in most Christians' life because they weren't living to look for it. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you have to, we're talking about parenting on purpose. praising on purpose. People don't praise, they don't look for that, or they're not living godly lives, so God's not really doing much
I
for
think
them.
that's a big part of it is when you are living a godly life, especially in our young married life, we were making a lot of what most people would call sacrifices. So we were making choices like if you weren't going to work at all during any church services, and then you got to where you weren't going to work when it was time for you to be at ministry stuff. We were making choices that financially were hard, but every time you make a choice for the Lord, then when He blesses, it's so exciting. So a lot of times people aren't seeing the blessings of God because they're not living by faith. They're not putting themselves in a position where it's difficult. I look back at our young married life, and talk about difficult. It was a struggle financially.
But there's huge steps of faith there.
Huge steps of faith, which meant we were blessed with huge answers. All of those things were such a blessing. And it's not like we did it on purpose to get those things.
No.
But that's a byproduct.
But ultimately, it was a different road for you, and I would say it was more like, hold on, because we're going for a ride kind of a thing.
Yes, very
where
much.
you made a lot of decisions young that Christian school was geared to teaching you young, and you had church. So a lot of those decisions or things about the decisions you made were given to you and fed to you early. For me, everything was a stepping out of the boat onto the water. And if you're going to walk on water, you got to get out of the boat. But what are you going to do if you start to sink? Well, Jesus gave us that answer. You call out to the Lord. But the bottom line is like decisions on, well, I'm not going to take this job even though it pays more because it interferes with church or soul winning or family time, certain things. And there was no proof. I just had to take that step. So here I am stepping out of a boat. That made everything almost seem unstable. Like what's going to happen? Because we had no income. And I just said, God, you said this, now pay up. That's how I lived. I didn't have the second generation always sitting back and everything's
Calculate everything out.
But not just that, it was done already on the back of your
right,
parent.
right.
I had to do that, and you were sitting back going, okay, now all those things I made in an easy situation or easy environment, now I'm in an environment where my husband's making decisions for the first time, and this is scary because if I've ever had a reason to hold on to don't change, something's going to happen, and just do it my way and tell my husband how to do it. That was your life. But for me, it was all fresh and new, and I wanted to be used to God. And I wanted my kids to be so excited about serving the Lord. So I felt like all of that motivated me to get out of the boat and just let the chips fall where they may. And I knew that no matter what, He was there, and I could call out. It would take some humility, but I could call out and He would lift me back up. And I'll take the rebuke, oh, ye of little faith, or whatever it is that He tells me that I did wrong. But right now, when Jesus says, get out of the boat, when He says, train up a child in the way he should go, man, I'm getting out of the boat. I'm going to train that child. And I'm going to do it with purpose and drive and conviction. And the whole world's not going to like my attitude because I believe it. And if something goes wrong, God's got my back. But that's kind of the whole idea. Loving our children, loving the Lord and loving serving. I wanted it to be exciting. And I wanted that to be what they saw. I know many times Will, my right-hand man at 8 years of age, song leading and crawling underneath vans that should have been condemned, and in the junkyard. There were a lot of times where it was exciting. It was scary. And he got to attach himself to those things. You want to say anything?
Yeah, I think I've been thinking a lot about, of course, from the position of, parenting on purpose. Now I have my own to parent, and I analyze kind of on a constant basis. What did my parents do, in this situation? I think about that a lot. So, but I think about it still from the vantage point of being parented. And when I think about as kids, what was the focus of our family? And I see this so much now, the older I get, the disconnect between ministry, service, and home, and how people don't have what I had growing up, or a parent that would weave together for the right reason, biblical reasons, the ministry and home, and how it wasn't, okay, now it's time to go to church. Right now we're at church again this week. Like our life was that. Now I understand, we're pastors' kids, so, my father had a reason to be there, but there were so many different parts of it that came home. It wasn't just a place like the church, back when, the different ministries we had. My father would be busy working on something. He would be somewhere, or we would be with him, like working on those vans. And it was like that van wasn't so that you could drive around and, work a business. It wasn't the business van. It was the Lord's business van. It was so we could pick people up for church. And, it just, your whole mindset was ministry. God, I'm living for him. This is what I'm doing. It's not just all right, Sunday, time to live for Jesus. Wednesday night, time to live for Jesus. It was our whole life was that. And I know the older I got, the more it was like I could look back and go, wow, that really has created a habit in my life to look at everything through the glasses of, I am going to serve the Lord in whatever area it is. And I'm going to find a way to look at it that way first. Not, how is this for me? I was thinking about I'm going to be replacing my laptop here soon. This one's getting old. And it's not because, I want the newest laptop. It's because I'm like thinking about the different things that I do and do for the church and the different projects I work on. And I'm like, all I can think about is the church stuff. It's like I'm not, at home doing a YouTube channel or doing graphics for other people. I do some of that on the side, but that's not the reason. It's like, you see everything completely differently when you grow up that way. And I'm very thankful for parents that wanted us to love and serve the Lord.
I think putting an emphasis on serving the Lord has kept my children tender-hearted towards souls. Because when you're serving the Lord and really serving the Lord, not just doing it because it's a mechanical or
right.
Other people told you to do it, you realize the heart of Jesus. He came to seek and to save that which was lost, and that he died knowing that the great percentage of everyone who ever lived on earth is going to reject Christ, and only a small group will receive Christ, that there's a great need to continue to serve. And with through the years, as many servants as we've seen fall off and quit and run away and criticize and stop becoming producers in sharing the gospel, this consistency in serving the Lord, loving him and serving him, doing it because it is something that pleases God. You're never too far from giving a gospel tract out or sharing the gospel with someone else.
I think people so often use that term, living for the Lord, very loosely. And it just becomes a generic, I'm living for the Lord. But they're not actually living for the Lord. They're living for their self, and they're sprinkling the Lord in there. And, being a churchgoer or doing a few things, having some, maybe participating in some church activities, and they think they're living for the Lord. But that's not living. Living for the Lord is, you're taking all your possessions,
Right.
all of who you are, all the gifts that God's given you, and using them for him. And it's a wonderful, glorious life that you cannot produce living for yourself.
I think from the outside, you made a statement about, being told to do, and growing up, there was a lot of do this, you're going to do this. But so much of the way that you guys built our home was, we're doing this. This is just how it works. There is no other option. Like, I didn't see any other option, so it wasn't like I was like, I get to choose. I don't get to choose if I'm riding the church bus on Sunday morning, but that's just what we do. We ride the church bus. Right. And so it creates that habit in you that just says, this is just what we do. And you don't think, and that's one of the reasons I get frustrated at people who talk about, whether it be the phrase "Mama called, Papa sent," or you were made to. Sure, when you're a kid, it's like being made to brush your teeth until eventually you see the value yourself, and you're like, sure. I'm gonna just keep doing it because I want to have my teeth. And then the same thing goes for the Christian life. It was that way when we were kids. It was like you're gonna, and and it didn't. You're still that way to this day. You'll still guide and encourage and prompt. But now, what did it do? It fostered an understanding in us that is more than just we're doing this just because ain't never done it any other way.
That's
Right.
that's the hard part with these recovering fundies. I don't want to say that you're doing it for the wrong reasons, and it's never wrong to do something that's right. It's doing right is necessity to Christian growth, and just because you don't understand something doesn't mean you don't get to be obedient, or you shouldn't be obedient. That obedience is good. And so I've tried to teach my kids, if you love Jesus, just obey, even if you don't understand, because you love Jesus. He said, do it. Just
Right.
go ahead and do it. And how do you teach them that? Vicariously through parenting. You have to do it on purpose. And so we just developed that kind of life. I need to move on to some other subjects. It's going to be lengthy as it is, but let's talk about discipline a little bit. Jill, you want to start off on that, or because you were the discipline?
I was going to say, Dad, do you want to start off on that? Or how about me, the one doing discipline? Do I want to start off on that? Okay.
Well, we started off with very specific, a very small list that was very specific. And it was basically if direct disobedience, lying was the worst thing they could do, and they got the most
Spankings.
swats for that. And then direct disobedience, so if they just were to be defiant, which rarely, if ever, happened, because if and then, I would suppose we'd call it indirect disobedience, where it was something they knew they should do, but they just didn't, like, not
I
make
think
their
it's
bed. And then foolishness.
Yeah, I think it's important, and they're not in the house anymore, so we can't be put in jail. But I do think it's important to give an insight to how we did it. So we did it on a possibility of 10 swats. 10 swats was the most you would get, and the reason we would do that is because the Bible says, "Be angry and sin not." Everybody would say, "Don't discipline in anger," but God said, "Be angry." So we wanted to make sure our kids understood we're ticked off, but we didn't want to, rip their arms off and
Or just go till you feel better. I don't know. Have no discipline on ourselves.
Right. In this generation, there are those that are extreme and they lose control, but there are more who don't want to discipline at all, so they go to the other way. But for us, we said we need to have something on, not necessarily written down, but just a set protocol for it. So 10 spankings was the worst you could get, but that was just for lying. Lying in my house, I just believe if you can't tell the truth, you can't be reached. Now, the Bible says, "My son, give me thine heart." I couldn't go up to my boys or my kids and grab their heart. You can't. That has to be a choice they make. And the way that you get your kids to make that choice is you get them to be honest. Tell the truth. Because when you have honesty, you can have discussion. And they know that you're listening, and they know that you care, and it's not they just have to shut up. But there's lines. And so the scale there was, look, the worst thing you can do to mom and to me is to lie. The worst thing you do to Jesus is to lie, because you're shutting them off. And you're not living in reality. You're deceiving your own self, and that's not wise. So lying automatically was 10. Direct disobedience, that's where, go take out the trash and you didn't do it. You go clean your room and you didn't do it. It's just direct disobedience. We say turn left and you turn right. Just willful, I'm not going to, that got you 5. And then anything else, indirect disobedience, foolishness, stuff like that. I think those all averaged around 2 to 3. Just very seldom was there ever just one whop. But anything real light too, the older they got, the more it could be corrected with a look. So when you bring in 4 bags of candy into a radio station, don't do it. Just don't do it. But now that's the discipline side of it.
Well, and let me just throw
Sure.
in here real quick is that starts, no, not the 10 swats, but I mean, the disciplining starts from the moment they're born, is not letting them be in control.
What am I hearing, guys?
Was yours turned up, Mom, on accident?
I don't know if that was mine or
That
not.
was Mom's.
Oops.
It's okay.
Is it yours, Dad?
Oh, it's Dad's.
I'm-
Dad's.
I didn't think it was mine, but I was going to argue.
That's because I moved it over here and it must have turned it up.
Anyway, so from the time the baby comes home from the hospital, it's you know, I'm not saying you're not an ogre, you know, you love the child and do, but they don't run the roost, and you know, that's just really important. Whether it's as simple as they're fussing and fussing and fussing, and everything you know to do has been done, they've been loved, they've been fed, they've been, you know, they're clean, and you're like, well, you're not going to act like this and, you know, ruin everybody else's dinner. So in bed they go and shut the door and let them cry in there until they're done.
Well,
For
I have
us,
a-
when we're at home, give her a little swat on the bum and give her something to cry about.
How did you? I was thinking about this, about asking you guys this question. How did you differentiate between when a kid is just being a kid and when a kid is being foolish and needs punished?
A kid is
Dad's-
always foolish.
If dad's stirring them up, they're just being a kid.
A kid being a kid is a kid being foolish. The Bible says that foolishness is bound in the heart of a child. So it is, most people hate this, but I always convicted you right away for being foolish. It was up to you to prove to me that it was a mistake and not stupid foolishness. And I was more right than wrong on those things. So again, the level of the speed in which we handled it was immediate, always immediate. Whether you got, hey, what are you doing, or a quick discipline, you know, that was immediate.
So was it the parameters? Would it be the parameters that you set up on the front end of when and where you can behave foolishly? You know, I don't mean foolishly as in overall an inappropriate way,
Yeah, well,
but like, okay, at the dinner table is not a time for us, you know, to bring our army men and fight in the middle of dinner. Okay, but there was a time for that. There was a place for wrestling. There was a place to play, or maybe to yell or to scream or to run around.
Yes.
But was it mainly the parameters? Okay, this is a time to do that. This is not.
The parameters were that you had to pay attention to mom and dad.
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
That was the parameters. So if dad was being serious, you better be paying attention because it was time for you to be serious.
You're taking your
If
lead
dad's
from
being-
the
yes.
leader.
I think that's really good. Yeah, I didn't even think about that.
From the- from the
Teaching the
leader.
kids to really pay attention
Yeah.
to
And if I'm
to
being-
those around them, their
Without
authority.
having to be told, they just
Without-
watch.
Exactly. So if he's being serious and then you start being goofy, he'd immediately
So how'd
probably
you-
give you a
so
swat on
How do
the
you
butt and
get
be
them to
like,
pay attention
"I'm
to
being
the
serious."
to the
Because
parents?
okay, we're sitting at the dinner table. Dinner was always a family thing, and there were times of serious things. You didn't cut up when it was before dinner, right when you get to pray. Everybody sit down, you get ready, the food's there. We pray. That's a serious thing. But when you get done praying, you know, depending on the mood, it's at the table. If dad was in a bad mood, people knew that. If mom was struggling a little bit, people knew that. But generally, I enjoy life. If everybody has a good attitude, I like cutting up. So it wasn't hard because we televised. Our moods weren't hidden. We didn't lie. People knew dad's mad. I wasn't going to come in and be this fake, you know, godly Christian who had the weight of the world on his shoulders, but you would never know it. But I was going to be someone who fought through that frustration, but still did what was right and acted what's right. So sometimes, like at the dinner table, we'd cut up. We'd have a good time. And sometimes we wouldn't. But it was very easily, we just taught you to watch.
Well, this is something that I learned actually from you, because
I taught you something?
I would have
Is that with or
tended
without spankings?
to more look at the kids and say, but we didn't tell them first. Like, we didn't tell them. I didn't specifically say, don't do this, or I didn't say, okay, it's time to be serious. So when we first started out having conversations and you kids and as you begin to grow, and that was my initial was, oh, that's not fair. Like, it's not fair to correct you if I didn't tell you to sit down. But he, you know, your dad would be like, no, they could tell I'm being serious. Mm-hmm. they should know. Mm-hmm. And the funny thing is he's so right. You do know, if that's what you expect in your parenting, then that's what you get. If you think I have to warn them, I have to specifically tell them, and if I didn't specifically tell them, then they have an out and an excuse, then they're going to be running you ragged, because you can never say enough. Don't do this. Don't do this. Don't do this.
And that's
they think of more things than you think of.
Right, and that's sort of what would separate the kids from the average kid, like when you go out to eat, and why we're good, or we were always paying attention to, what you guys said. It wasn't really just because at the house and at home and everywhere we went, we were always required to sit still and be.
Right.
It was because we were watching you,
right?
And which you mentioned, paying attention to the parents and the cues, and as you get older, you just a look. If somebody started to misbehave, you just look. That would not be effective if at the early stages you didn't teach your
so
kids
many
to pay
things.
attention.
We at a restaurant, we'd get our meals paid for. Older people would just come up to the table and stand there and compliment our kids, and we always enjoyed those kind of things. But I think a lot of that was because Jill and I've had seen so many bad illustrations of parents not controlling their kids, throwing their food on the floor, screaming and hollering. You go to a restaurant today, you can hardly go to any. An Olive Garden's supposed to be a date night place to eat, and they've got all their kids, and they're running around screaming, throwing spaghetti noodles on the people across the aisle, and you're like,
and everybody else is supposed to just understand, and it's cute.
Yeah, and so
a kid.
I'm sitting. The server's dumb as a box of rocks, and they put you right next to you're an older couple. You're clearly on a date, and they sit you right next to screaming kids. So then the waiter comes over, and waitress comes over, and I say, "Could we sit over there?" And then what's really bad is we mean nothing by it, but we just want to eat our dinner in peace, as quiet, because it's a restaurant.
Right.
You're paying big money, and now it's turned into, oh, you don't like kids, or the family that had all the kids were a black family, so now you're prejudiced. You want to sit next to a black family with kids, and it doesn't mean any of that. But that's why I wanted to have kids that could read the room. They could read the room. They could read the family. They could read their leaders, and I felt like teaching that was attainable through discipline, and consistency of discipline was so important. You don't put off your discipline. Now, obviously, I didn't discipline my kids physically in a public realm. I didn't do it in church, and I didn't do it, that's just
outside on the porch.
Yeah, I didn't do it. I did. We had a place for it in the bedroom, and they weren't allowed to scream their lungs out, or they got more spankings.
We weren't uncontrolled, and they were uncontrolled.
Which that would understand, or that would explain to some extent the two system rules that you had growing up, because you would think you got to have the 10 Commandments, or you got to have, but the rule of law was dad. That's what the rule was. It didn't mean that you didn't have rules here and there, but if you think about that and how much that changes the way you think when it comes to God, no longer is it I'm only going to do it if. Where does it say it?
The two great commandments.
Where does it say thou shalt not smoke? Where does it say?
Right.
Instead, you're looking at God as what do you want? And it causes you to not only accept standards and principles so much more easily, but also to move on the conviction of the Holy Spirit more quickly and more sensitively, because it's not just where is it in the Bible. I want to see it clearly. It's, there's a hint here that God would not be happy with this. It's done. I'm booting it out of my life. So that's interesting. I think that's very good.
The other thing I guess I just want to throw in here, and I just thought of this, is as a parent, and this, again, starting from about the time they get mobile, but is awareness. And I think both your dad and I really practiced being aware.
Yeah.
So, what does it say?
And making sure they
a
knew
child
we
that's
were
left to
aware.
himself,
Bringing
bringing his
someone to
mother to shame. And it doesn't just mean you leave the child alone in the house. It means that you're just not paying attention. You're not paying attention to what they're doing, and then thinking, why are they doing that? And what am I doing that could either prevent that or encourage that?
See, I grew up. I know exactly why I did what I did. It was, I lived in a situation where the bad things I did would be horrible, shocking things that you guys we go, oh my soul, we've ruined our kids are turned out like the devil. I did them on the norm. I knew exactly what I did. So I didn't have to sit down and fight against giving you the benefit of the doubt. I didn't get tripped up on that. I knew that when something happened, I know why you did it. Because you wanted to. You're being bad, and there was no discussion on that kind of thing.
Why did you shoot the
What that
light
leads
out
me
with
to
your
the
BB gun?
next thing on discipline is it was important for us on discipline to teach them the difference between a real apology and a fake apology, what real repentance is. And repentance is turning around, going the other way. And in the Bible, it talks about repentance that is heartfelt. It's not always an expression of tears and weeping, but you can tell a contrite spirit. And they weren't allowed to just go, sorry, because that means they were just trying to get through it. And so that would require us to start the whole process over. And, you have to go back.
Or the
But we
classic,
wanted them.
Sorry.
We
Trying to
wanted
get out.
them.
I was about to say that.
We
I was about
wanted
to say
them
that.
to know what they did. So here's what we did. They lied. Go to your room. Come to the room. Bring the paddle with us.
45 minutes later.
45. And make you sweat, because God doesn't always discipline you right away.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, He tells you you're in trouble, and you should be expecting it. And God's going to come. He's going to show up, and that's the deal. But it prepares you to make a decision. Am I going to tell the truth, or am I going to lie again? Am I going to try to get out of it, and most of the time you failed and tried to squirm out of it. But anyway, get to the room, ask you, what did you do? I lied. Does Jesus like it when we lie? No. Did He die on the cross because you lied? Yes. Should we do things that Jesus had to die for? No. No, you hurt Jesus. It was always about making you associate your sin with the cross and the payment that was taken. And so now that wasn't long drawn out, but it was just, what did you do? Okay. You hurt the Lord. That was early in the life of the child. Then
As soon as they could talk, they had to say what they
you
did.
have to respond. Discipline isn't just, you're wrong, spank, spank, spank.
No, go be good.
Yeah, go be good. No. What did you tell me what you did wrong? And they always know, kids know better than you do. You might find out some things they did wrong that you didn't know they did wrong. And so they tell you, and they say, okay, what's the penalty? 10 spankings. Okay, you need to take these, and don't be jumping around and screaming out bloody murder. Just take it, and it'll be over. Yes, sir. 1, 2, 3, and they had to count them out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And then when it's done, they get to see the parent. What was my face? Was my face, I whooped you good. Am I sick and tired of you? Or is it we're broken? That we did not enjoy that. And it hurt us to have to hurt you. And let's tell Jesus we're sorry. That was just the foundation of reaching the hearts of our young people. But it taught them what true repentance was. And I think is a good lesson, still worthy to be taught today to many of American children.
And I think the consistency of doing that kind of discipline over and over, but not without mistake, doesn't mean as parents we did not fail at times to, follow all the way through the process properly ourselves either. But the consistency of it is a must.
And then the last part on that discipline thing is teaching behavior. So, obviously you touched a little bit on that. You go to the restaurant, there's a way you behave. You go to church, Paul wrote to Timothy how you ought to behave in the house of God. These kids that are preachers' kids or missionary kids or deacons' kids shocked me how they had this evangelist that posts clips of his kids staying in a church because he's preaching there, and his kids are jumping on the piano in their pajamas on the church's piano. And if I said the Evangelist's name, you would know him. And those parents thought that was funny. They put it on social media. And before social media, people thought it was funny that their kids were rambunctious, and to us, it was horror. To think that our kids would do that.
One of the worst times was when Hope was like 2, and she knows this story. We were still at college, and I had gone to the college dining hall for some reason to have lunch.
With me.
And we were putting our trays away, getting ready to leave, and we probably both turned opposite directions. Dad went one way, Mom went the other way, and Hope somehow escaped our grasp. And we looked down, and we had walked right past the formal dining room, which had probably about,
25 preachers.
Yeah, preachers and whoever in there, the formal dining room.
They had a big conference.
And we're like, where's Hope? And we look, and there she was. She had crawled in the room, and she was right at the edge of the table.
Yeah.
Like, just getting in the room, right, and on the floor.
Underneath it.
Underneath the table.
Yeah.
And, of course, we didn't want to go in the room. We're like, come here, come here.
You weren't. I was.
We were both trying to get her to
Those
come out.
those preachers all looking at me. They're like, okay, let's see what's going to happen here. And
Hope
I'm like,
sees our
Hope,
smile. She thinks it's a game.
I said, Hope, come on. I'm like, we're all kind of laugh a little bit because we're like, this is not.
This is awkward.
Of course, in my head is like, if I get a hold of you. And I think Hope knew that in her head. She thought,
Oh, they're laughing. They're smiling.
yeah,
They're
but
gonna get away
if Dad does get a hold of me,
I'm in trouble.
so you know what she did? She went further in the table down the line.
Underneath.
So she's about 8 preachers in, and I'm lying. I'm like, I can't get her. I'm not gonna be able to get her. And none of these guys would help me out. None of them would
Reach down and get her
grab
like
her,
a stray puppy, but
no. And so you know what I had to do? I got on my hands and knees and crawled the length of all those preachers, and they're just and I got a hold of her and I said in her ear, I'm gonna wear you out, girl. But yeah, I mean that's just embarrassing things like that happen, and I was embarrassed.
Not
But
much
talk
has
about
changed.
training. That
Well,
is
here's a good question because I mean, you said how old was she? 2?
Mm-hmm.
2 years
Eloise
old.
age.
I think about it, and this has happened a couple times already. I mean, Everly's not that old.
She's not even mobile.
You don't even have stories yet.
No, but
son.
Well, let me ask my question because
go ahead.
because this is relevant.
I don't see
So-
her crawling on your tables. Or
Hey,
anything.
I'm asking you for advice here. Do you want that, or do you want me to just be like, I'm gonna do it my own way?
Well, I think my ways.
Yeah, I'm gonna ask. That's what I want to know. I want to know what's a good way. Like you think about that, and I've had instances where there's been a moment of correction, a moment of sternness, and it's very, very clear that they understand that you're being stern. Not that they understand every word you're saying,
Right.
But that they know you're being stern, and they go from being fussy to now they look at you and they're like, oh, let me smile now. When they know they've crossed the line already, and you're like, all right, now I'm gonna give you a swat, or there's gonna be some discipline, or there's gonna be some visible disapproval, and then they think it's a game, kind of like that, where they look at you and you probably looked at them and were like, come on, and you're like, okay, let's go, and they look at you with that, yeah, like okay, it's okay now, or give you like the smile. What steps do you
Trying
take?
to wrap you around their finger, you mean?
Sure. Yeah. What steps do you take even from a young age to like, because you can imagine a parent being like, oh, they're just so cute.
Well,
now.
I'll tell you this: from your tone of voice, you're probably already decided. She's gonna know. She's gonna die. So, I mean, you're on the right track. She's got to believe that you're going to do something about it. But most parents, they just don't do anything, and that's why the kid acts that way. Your kid's not going to act that way. More than likely, because she's going to think, I mean, she's not even 6 months old, and she's probably scared to death that she's going to, throw up the wrong way. So
No, but I think even at Everly's age, that you can look at her and tell her no, and then you're paying attention to her so that she wants to smile. Like a split second later, you could say, "Daddy's being serious. We're not playing." And give her a minute.
But would you say
Give her a minute
say
of
being
serious-
consistent in that and not changing just because the kids
Just because she smiles.
the kid's disposition
When-
changed and
when
like,
you're-
okay, I'm going to be nice now.
But
when
don't
you're
be
in
overly hard.
when you're in the midst of correcting, to me, eye contact's the biggest thing. And so the older they get, the more they think they can correct you. And then there's a point where there's nothing you can say, so you just got to shut up as a parent. And you just go. But that's why when they're young, that eye contact, that the whole world shuts down when you're correcting your kid, and you look at your child and Everly, look at Daddy.
Mm-hmm.
You might have been talking to adults and something happened, and you realize my kid's being bad. Everly, and it doesn't matter what that conversation was. You said, "Well, I'm talking to adult, but you're raising a kid,
right?"
And so looking at her and getting her attention, and then saying, "You understand me?" And until you get that look, keep that eye contact.
Bring the seriousness to them.
Bring it.
Right.
Bring it. All right. The next thing I'm going to talk about is dress standards, or standards as a whole. That's dress, music, entertainment, sports. Obviously, we would address this. It had to be on a balance.
There's just so much here. It's like
Yeah, there's hardly, we can't unpack everything. But, clear cut, we can teach the difference between undress between a man and a woman. We can show you in the Bible where God clothed even Adam and Eve differently in the garden. Once they tried to make their own clothes, he said that's not good enough. One of the major markers of the difference between the clothes they made and the clothes God made was God put on more clothes. There was more to them than what they made for themselves, and had a different material. So material was important. The amount was important.
And we have another broadcast that
that covers
delves into a lot of dress issues, but yeah.
Okay, are we done then?
No.
Okay.
I was just thinking we don't have to, go over everything that we went through on that, but
okay. You remember it better, and I don't know what I went over and what I didn't. So
I was talking about the one the ladies did about ladies' dress.
Oh, that's probably why I don't remember it.
Yeah, that was season 1.
I wasn't there.
What was it? Los Pantaloons?
No Mas
No
Pantaloons.
Mas yeah, whatever it was.
Well, I didn't really want to talk about that, but we ended up talking about it. So, just the idea of the standards being biblically based comes from principles of the Bible. So the dress is clearly remarked. Music, the Bible tells us psalms, hymns, spiritual songs, breaking it down. Everything that you guys have been taught about music's from biblical principles and can be clearly seen, not just seen, but heard. And we just taught those things. Entertainment is not wicked. God made things for our enjoyment. It's moderation. It's proper balance. You don't miss something spiritual because you're involved with Little League, baseball, softball. God's first. God's first. So sports was never first, and entertainment was never first. Acting was never first. Plays were never first. Obviously, movies, TV, stuff like that. For the majority of your young lives, we kept you very separated from that. But then slowly introduced proper and acceptable things on the TV. You never watched movies that weren't pre-watched by us. We didn't approve. All that falls underneath ideas of wisdom and being wise and balanced.
And so much of this really is all about influence. So whether it's the music, the entertainment, the sports, it's all about how much you are allowing your child to be influenced by those things and what direction it's taking them. So,
I think there's an overarching, whatever it is, lesson behind each of the things that we've looked at, in that you guys were the parents. It didn't matter how much we wanted it, or other kids had it, or other people did it. When it came to the way that our home was set up, we knew Dad laid down the law. And if there was a reason that we didn't understand, you'll figure it out eventually, And it was, whether it came to music, entertainment, things like that. Of course, I remember one time we got in trouble for something. All 4 of us, I think it was probably we didn't have our room clean. But Dad said one summer, no pool. And we had already set the pool up, remember, in the back? No pool. And, well, hang on. Here's what happened. We were cleaning. It was a Monday or something. And I remember You know, it was summer, it was hot, that pool was going to be nice. And it was one of those days where you're like, it's been a few weeks since Dad said no more pool. And Dad came out and he's like, got a towel. And he goes to the back door and he's like, looks at us, he goes, you guys coming? We're all like, you said we're not allowed to. He said, I know. And now I say you can. And of course, we're all like, yeah. But it's just one of those things where it was like, you know, he lays down the law. Not that you know, there was perfection.
And then he changes the law.
There was perfection in parenting, but it taught us to, we're following our leadership. We're being obedient. Does that make sense? And I think there's a lot of that purposeful parenting that's not going on, where parents will cave to whatever their kids want, or, well, everybody else is doing it. So, and really having a parent that was willing to be like, I don't care what Johnny and Susie get to do down the street. Mm-hmm. You ain't doing that, you know?
Yeah, I didn't even really write anything down about that, but I think that was a big thing, especially as you got into your teenage years. That was more difficult for Dad and I. That the judgment of others when we would go places or be around other Christians, on them thinking that, and even really when they were younger, that we were too hard on you or too strict or too whatever, or, you know, I mean, even the Christian school they were in when Hope and Will were like first and second grade, and the class was playing Red Rover, and they had all the boys and girls join hands, and of course Hope, being the diligent little Christian that she is, refused to hold hands with a boy, but Buddy, of course, did not care.
He liked holding hands with boys.
Yeah. See, I don't feel bad when we have our little. I don't feel bad. Not after garbage like that. I don't feel bad.
Mom insists on telling that story. I wasn't going to bring it.
I thought that I was equally as, this is not good, but I'll hold her hand, but this is not good.
So
you were younger.
I was obeying.
Yes,
leadership.
you were younger, and when the teacher told you to do something,
you gotta obey.
You were doing it.
I gotta hold her hand.
We have to go on, because there are some good things here on this list, and it's already 6:37. So we have to move on. I already talked about balance. We also talked about vocalizing how God meets needs. We did that all the time. Giving was important. We made sure that our kids knew that we tithe, and then we were always trying to involve them in our giving of alms and extra things to people in need, and encourage them to express to us when they saw there was a need, if they couldn't meet that need, asking us if we would help on those things. Anything else on giving?
Just that they had to learn to give too. When they had something, then they were generous, to be generous.
That's what I mean.
And they were. Yeah.
Teaching them tithing. Yeah. And when I say teaching them tithing, that involves not only showing them what that means. By the way, kids are easy to teach. Mm-hmm. They get $1 and they always put 100% in. And you're like, no, you get 90 cents of it. Put 10 cents in.
Unless you want to give more.
Yeah. And they're always willing to give. So that's the easiest time to teach tithing. But then that's not the whole process. Then you wait, and when God blesses, you say, see, this is giving. Mm-hmm. You give, and God gives. And God takes care of, and God meets maybe something over here that you weren't expecting. But that's why God gives and blesses the Reeves family and the Reeves kids with all this extra stuff, trips and flights in a plane over the Grand Canyon. It's because you all given to the Lord and to others, and God sees that and He blesses. So it's making sure that you teach the whole process all the way through by pointing out, because kids sometimes don't see those extra things. So you have to point them out. Say, see, this is what God's doing. And they're like, oh, wow, cool. The other thing, we taught them how to work hard. There was no standing on the sidelines. Everybody got in, got dirty, and got to enjoy the blessings of everything. We did a garden one year. Never forget it. Just weeding, watering. Everybody took turns planting it. And then when the corn came up, we had a good time going out there and picking it and then cooking it and eating it. And so that's just one example. But
I remember you doing a sidewalk from the church parsonage to the church.
I remember that.
You probably were like 5.
I remember it.
And you were out there, as far as I know, you were helping shovel out that.
Yeah. And to this day, when the church has a project, or even if there's major things at somebody's house, everybody just I would think they have this natural feeling like, hey, let's all go, let's do it, especially when it comes to church. So
The family was a team.
yes,
Our team.
but what that did was it built character in them. So we don't have lazy children, except when I say they're lazy. They all work hard. They're productive. The key is, until to this day, I'll come, what'd you do today? And I'll get off your back if you can show me what you did. So it's all about being able to measure your own production and that's how you know you're a hard worker. And and then this next one is eating. Luke 10:8 says, and in whatsoever city you enter, and they receive you, eat such things as are set before you. Nothing irked me more than to watch children turn their nose up to what their mom and dad have worked so hard to provide. Right. Mm-hmm. And we live on feeding kids chicken nuggets and candy, Pop-Tarts, and little juice boxes and all that. Uh-huh. And now it's to the point where if they don't get that, they tell the parent, "No, I'm not eating." And that never went well with me. Of course, I could have spent a lot of time beating my kids because I didn't like it. I first found a Bible principle. It's funny how so many things are in the Bible. But I just said, hey, look, God, you don't know what God's going to do. He may call you to the mission field. You might go on vacation somewhere to a foreign land. And the reason God's saying this is because these men were going somewhere. If somebody's giving you something, it might be the best they have. You have to learn to accept what people give you. And you may not like it, but you have to learn to eat things you don't like for that reason. Right. And so they weren't allowed to complain about the food that was set before them. They may not like corn. Hope made the mistake one time complaining about corn. She didn't like corn. And so I told her, I said, "Oh, you like corn? Here's another spoonful." And she complained. I give her another spoonful. And so she caught on. She said, "Oh, every time I complain, I get another spoonful." And if she didn't complain, she could decide how much corn, as long as it was reasonable. She couldn't take 2 kernels, but if she took one scoop and put it on her plate and ate all the kernels of corn, that was acceptable. When you were young, we served your portions because we're deciding how much you eat, and you got a portion of everything. If you didn't eat it all, we didn't criticize. We tried to get you as much as you can. But when you got the privilege of scooping your own plate and feeding yourself, you took what you ate what you took, and you cleaned your plate. Anything else about eating?
No, I just think that's again a character thing. Learn to eat.
And eating as a family helps that.
Yes.
This American way of everybody goes to the refrigerator and gets what they want. Nobody eats together, or putting it on putting it on a TV tray, sitting there. We didn't do that. We sat at the table.
Family,
everybody's around the
night.
table, prayed, and broke bread together, and everybody ate everything.
Yeah.
So
and it was rooted from the principle of don't be selfish. Be grateful for what you have. I remember we were never allowed to say I don't like something. And we always had to eat what was on our plate, and it was that principle. And you know what happens when your kids have to eat everything when you get older, you're not a picky person,
right?
So you're not somebody, I don't like this. I'm not given to appetite. I want this. I don't want this. I want this.
I remember you'd have people come to your house. The kids and their parents would be like, "Oh, our kids don't like this," and I can remember it was like, "Oh, you're not supposed to do that."
It's like,
but I just remember you're waiting, like what's going to happen?
Me.
What's Dad?
You're like, what's going to happen?
And
it's like I want to be like, have you lost your mind?
No,
and you're
I always brought up Luke chapter 10 verse
Right.
8 and mentioned it somewhere in the.
I just remember as a kid sitting there going, like, inconceivable. Like, I couldn't even put it in my head. But I know even, the older we get, and I think about it, I told Kay this all the time. I said, it's like I was raised to complete the other person who has preferences, It's like, it'd be like, sure, let's eat that. Let's have that. Let's try that, And still to this day, we see that a lot. And when Dad's like, where are we going to eat? Ain't nobody got a preference because it's like, whatever you want. We don't care. We'll do it.
And we always take turns picking, and as soon as somebody picks, we go, oh.
No, this is garbage.
But that quality of parenting aided us well when we traveled, because we would go into homes where they would feed us.
Oh, yeah.
And, I don't care how many times you feed a kid artichoke. There's no way he's going to like it. But I remember, you learn you learn the principle of being able to overcome the things that you don't like.
Right.
And that quality, that
keep your
principle
mouth
exceeds, it I don't know if exceeds is the right word.
It teaches you
but it goes
graciousness.
across not just food, but across transcends not just food, but like you said, character on how to deal with difficult
People
things,
and situations,
people,
yeah.
physical fitness.
It also teaches you how
anything,
not to
difficult
tell
times.
the truth when you don't have to. It's like when you eat something that's really bad, and they go, "Isn't that good?" You say, I've never tasted anything like that before. That
Tell
hit
the truth.
spot,
You just,
yeah, but you're not going, "Oh man, what is
Right.
this?" And hurting someone's feelings. But so many things wrapped up in teaching our kids about eating that actually applies across the board. Being very gracious is a trait that I want to make kids to be a giver, to be a gracious person. It would come. I would say that it's rooted in some of these things about eating. Let's go on to the next thing: masculinity and femininity. From a young age, for me, more than my wife. Not that my wife was against it, but I was a little more sensitive to it. I never liked. I'm not saying it's a sin, but I never liked taking our kids in public in pajamas. I know that church clothes are becoming very hard to find, and when they're small, they're even harder to find. So you're blessed to find, if you have a girl, an acceptable dress, but you can get away with a lot of things when they're little. And same thing with the guys, the proper dress and attire. We try to do our best to always outfit them. The boys dressed as boys and went to church. They had ties, and they might be a bow tie, might be a regular tie, but it was going to be a tie. Just tried to always set that. And the girls, the same thing, the dresses. We didn't like the dresses in the world because they were always above the knee, and it was like mini skirts all the time. So hunting hard and finding something, and then if they were longer, they were way too wide, or and
It's always a struggle.
There's always a struggle, but it was worth the fight. It was worth the making the adjustments, putting needles or pins in to shore them up. And as they got older, they were always put examples in front of them that guys dress in this and girls dress in this. One avenue about masculinity and femininity I thought was important, that it's not so important today, but when my kids were young, I believed in this thing that I learned even before I was saved. When children are born, the boys are wrapped in blue blankets and the girls are wrapped in pink. And you laugh.
I'm just
A church
laughing because
church
it's
kid would
obvious,
laugh.
right?
I'm like dead serious. I really am bothered by the pastel movement on men, and just the softening that the feminist movement. I'm just saying.
You're right.
I was literally thinking about my tie.
It was just instinctive. Check my tie.
Yeah, well, I'm constantly bothered by that,
Right.
Yeah.
because there is a movement. You got to be a man to wear pink, and I look at people when they say it to me, I'm not being mean. If they say it to me, I look at it and say, I think you got to be a man not to wear one.
I like what you always said. But what real man wants to?
Right.
I like that.
So I know there's no sin in wearing pink, but that's not the point. It's not about sin. It's about what's that applying to in the majority across the board, and teaching my kids masculinity and femininity. My girls, the softness can be taught in their attitudes by the dress and the way they wear. The guys, guys don't just wear shirts and ties that are 15 sizes too big or 15 sizes too small, because that also teaches you some worldliness. And so there's so much aspect to the masculinity and femininity. I'm reminded of a time my wife. Well, you tell the story.
Trying to think how to start. You had come home. I don't know. Will was.
We're gonna
he
use
was
Will.
little. Yeah, he was like 2 years old, and
He's, by the way, my first boy.
right.
David wasn't even born yet.
Yes.
I
And,
had one girl and one boy.
And Will was just an opposite personality from Hope. Hope was very sure of herself, very aggressive. No danger was,
She was an
she
animal.
wasn't afraid of anything. Her dad could throw her as high as he could, and she would laugh, falling all the way. And he always caught her, but she just had no fear. Will, on the other hand,
Different
he had
person.
more good sense,
Yeah.
and he understood gravity at the age of 2. So
Sometimes people are smarter younger.
yes. So he was more aware.
I like how you're painting this. This is
Yeah,
great.
right,
It's like,
right.
like
I'm being.
Well, if you would
I'm doing
rather
my
me go the
best.
other direction,
that's normally
He
the
was-
direction you go, so I know how insincere this is. Normally, like, it was a stinking chicken, the little.
it's both sides,
Right,
But
right,
I'm being
yeah,
sensitive
yeah. I
to
appreciate
how
that.
you are very
No, Dad,
offended
hey,
if I
say
say
it like it is.
he was acting like
No,
a queer.
say it like it is. Don't politic for me.
So-
Say it like it
Because he had
is.
a big head,
That's the
and he was
old-fashioned
constantly
guy
hitting the concrete.
that I
with it.
am.
So anyway, Dad comes home and I'm like, Will. We called him Buddy then. Buddy is just afraid of everything. I think he just really needs to spend some time with you.
I don't know why she said that because it's been
'Cause he
hell
just
on earth
needed-
since then.
He needed to be with his dad and just have that sense of, manliness. And me and Dad are buddies, and I'm like Dad. That's what and so now you tell the rest. So you took him down to the.
I didn't know what to do.
Yeah,
To
you
be
looked at
honest
me
with
kinda
you,
like,
I didn't think it was. You don't sit at 3 years old,
2-year-old, yeah.
3-year-old kid down to say, "Listen, I need you to be a little bit more manly. Stop crying. Stop
Right.
being scared of the tidy bowl man. When you're on
Oh,
the Ferris
yeah, I hate
wheel,
toilets.
when you're on a Ferris wheel, you're not supposed to go like
toilets.
this when it hasn't even moved.
Oh, and I was so scared. I was so scared of yeah.
So
Swing set.
So
you
scared
don't.
of it.
But you don't.
I was so scared of water.
You
Oh,
can't
man, are
sit the
kidding me?
kid. You can't sit a kid like that down and talk to him that way. So I thought, well, we lived literally. Our house was maybe 50 feet from a railroad track, and he loved trains. I mean, when trains were going by, he was fascinated. And he had trains in the house, and trains were cool. And I said, "Hey, bud, you want to go down by the trains?" He goes, "Yeah." And I knew generally when the trains were going through town. It was a steel mill town, and I said, "Come on, let's go." So we just went down and we walked on the tracks, and he probably doesn't remember any of this, but we were just talking. I think I even took coins and said, "Hey, we're waiting for a train to come and we're going to smash this coin." He's like, "Okay." He's excited. He loves spending time with his dad. But I knew what would happen when those trains come by. The ground would be shaking, and there'd be loud noise, and rah, And he's never been that close to it, so I knew he'd be freaking out. So I kept telling him, saying, "Now look, when the train comes, you're going to feel it, and when the train comes, it's going to be loud. And when the trains come, maybe the conductor will blow the horn, and we got to quick. We don't want to get run over by the train because we don't want to be flat." So I would tell him.
I have no idea
this
why I was
coin?
scared.
See
I
this
have no
coin?
idea. We don't want to be smashed into the front of a train and our guts go everywhere.
This coin used to be a human.
I would tell him everything that was going to happen that I thought he would struggle with. And sure enough, the train was coming, and you could see his eyes. He'd get excited. The train's coming. And then it'd get closer, and it would just be a shift, where he would start getting real nervous because it's about to happen. And I just held his hand, and I said, "Buddy," I said, "it's going to be okay. It's going to be cool. It's going to be," and I just kept reinforcing that this was the coolest moment that we're spending together.
It's so cool.
Yeah. And so when he got close and he did lose his cookies and start crying, I said, "Buddy, stop it. Stop. You don't need to cry. Dad is right here. I'm not letting go of your hand. We are going to have a good time." And
Enjoy yourself.
but it was just spending that time. And about halfway through, the train was about halfway through, still loud, but the engine was by, and we were waiting to get the penny that we crushed and everything. He had pulled it together, and we're both standing there, and we're just enjoying the train, and he could enjoy it. At that whole thing was done. We took him home, gave him back to his mom. No, I didn't. We went back home, back to our life, and it was a noticeable difference that through that event, Will took that process and applied it to other things in his life. And I think, the Bible talks about the effeminate person. I think that people who don't try to help their kids digest the things of life quickly cross over into a softer area and whining and complaining and crying and being hurt deep inside. And boys need to be taught how to handle things like boys should handle things. Not that we don't bottle it. We're not bottling it up, but we're going to discuss it. We're going to deal with it. We're going to process it. But we're not going to look like some little third grade girl, And the opposite is true with the girls. I like that my girls are aggressive, but I told them there's a way the ladies fall. There's you don't, when we're playing football, you don't, you won't want to, but you don't tackle them, where I encourage the boys, smear the queer and be aggressive, so.
I was going to say, the girls must not have been listening because I got absolutely demolished all the time.
They were allowed to tackle you.
Oh,
I didn't allow them
yeah.
to tackle other boys that were on.
Right.
So that, and to be someone who gave the male a little bit of room because they're naturally supposed to be a leader. Not that you allow wrong or disrespect, but just to be that person who understands that. So all of that stuff was important, and I think Jill did a good job at the same thing when she was at home, making sure that the boys treated the girls or reminded them to treat their sisters good. And
We tried.
yeah, but that comes with job duties. The girls got the easier jobs. The guys got the harder
Take out the
jobs.
trash.
So there was gender assigned jobs, whatever, just natural. That boys were always supposed to protect their sisters, so they were supposed to be the protectors, and then they should want to protect them. So when they were out walking around the big, huge city of Brewster, the boys were charging the way. They were the ones that were watching out while their sisters were stealing things out of the supermarket. Life's calling. How we handled life's calling. We told our children they were not ours, and we were just stewards. God gave our children to us to care for, and if God called them to the ministry, that's great. If God didn't, we just wanted them to love the Lord and serve Him. You don't have to be called to be a soul winner. You don't have to be called to be honest. All the things that we taught them. If they mastered those things, I felt. If God didn't call them to service, He missed an opportunity, because those are things that our young people should be that are not being that way. And then I sat the kids down and I said, God did not put you on this world with this mom and dad who are serving God faithfully to have you ignore that line of work or that thing. So they always had and understanding that it's very possible that they're going to carry on the family business.
To whom much is given, much is required. That was, yep.
But it obviously was their choice.
Yeah, and when you grow up, invest in your life into something, it becomes a part of you.
Yep.
Where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. So if you find a kid who's no longer in church, no longer investing in others, it's probably more than likely because he wasn't or she wasn't investing in lives when he was or she was little.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think the teen years are really, really crucial in this, in for your vocation, what you're choosing to do, and as parents, being aware of what you're gifted at, what you're good at, and feeding you things that interest you, giving you opportunities of things that you like to do and love to do, but it's all wrapped around how you can use those talents for the Lord. Because it doesn't matter what talent God's given you. There's something in church. If it's not there, it can be created, which is the whole reason we have Canaan Radio.
Yep. So let's go on next devotions. Every morning we'd make them read with us the Bible and pray for 15 hours, and they walk to school on their knees in glass. And I think the most damaging thing for most young people is a set of parents who believe that if they're not making their kids read the Bible with them every single morning, and praying with them, their kids can't turn out balanced. We didn't put that on our kids. Not that we didn't ever read the Bible with them. I know Mom did a lot of Bible stories and stuff like that with the kids, but we tried to nurture a connection with God, and we showed them the Bible and said, this is where you learn about Him, and if you want answers to your questions, you'll find it there. But it was never about making them have devotions with us. We encouraged personal devotions. So we did tell them, in the morning, get up, spend time with God before you get busy doing anything else. Read your Bible. And we didn't ask them every day, but we'd ask them. If they got attitudes, we'd ask, did you read your Bible this morning? Mm-hmm. And that's how I did it. I don't know, Pete, if you guys did any different in your home. But I know being introduced in the independent fundamental Baptist movement at that time, the big thing was family devotions, And I'm not opposed to them. I don't think they're evil, but I think I've heard enough complaints from your generation of kids that resented the parents making them do that. And I sat in enough of them early with Danny and Tom and your mom and dad that I just didn't see the interest in their eyes. Not that it just wasn't there. So I feel like our way of doing it worked good for us, and we could have been done better, but
Yeah, I think that's very true. I mean, I appreciate the fact that, my parents were very faithful and very regular about family devotions every morning. We read a chapter of the Bible as a family, went around the room, each reading a verse. But I think, like you said, I think a lot of times it does become, as a parent, you can feel like I'm doing my duty, teaching my kids the Bible because I'm doing that.
yeah.
When it's a good thing to do. There's nothing, if you're doing that, then don't stop.
Yeah, do it on
It's not-
purpose.
Do it on purpose,
Yeah.
right.
But if you don't do it, you're not going to kill your kid.
Right, not necessarily. I think the most important thing is what Deuteronomy says, which is, thou shalt teach them diligently unto thy children, shalt talk about them when thou sittest in thy house, when thou walkest by the way, when thou liest down, and when thou risest up. It's got to be integrated into every
Right.
area of your
And I think
life.
we had a somewhat unique situation, and maybe a lot of PKs do, preachers' kids,
Yeah.
where we, you opening the Bible and morning devotion isn't the only time that we hear you opening the Bible. I mean, we hear it Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night, Sunday school, at school, in chapel. So that offers a different level of connection with your parents than you would normally get, that maybe the family devotion
that's
area
true.
would fill that area. So,
With the dad being a spiritual leader, where he naturally was because he's a pastor.
right. But I do think just talking
I
about
remember
it.
the few times that you did. I remember in Brewster, it wasn't a many years thing, but I remember us going through Proverbs, and
Right.
we'd sit around the kitchen table in the morning. And I think the thing that sticks out in my mind the most was it wasn't even that we went around the table and read a verse, each of us. It was you read it and you get done and be
Explain
like,
it.
all right,
That's
all
what
right,
you
buddy.
did a lot.
All right. What'd you think? And then
Yeah.
you'd be like, you're like, what about this verse? And you read the easiest verse, just real easy verse. Like, I don't know, my son gave me that heart or something. What's that mean? What does that mean?
Yeah.
It's like
Trying to draw truth out of it.
right. And but then you would teach us. You would teach us how to read the Bible. I think that's a big part of growing up as a young person. We may not have done regular organized family devotions, but you were very intent. You guys were both very intent on teaching us to read God's word, but to absorb it and to
and
make
you would
it
ask
practical.
us, what did you read?
Yeah.
Often.
Right.
And,
I'd ask you that about sermons before you ate on Sunday.
Oh, yeah.
That's another good thing.
Yeah. Yeah, every Sunday.
go ahead and
yeah,
tell
what
about
do you guys
that.
tell that?
It was just those common practice that after we got done with church on Sunday morning, when we sat down for lunch, before we could eat, we all had to go around the table and each give something that we learned from the message. And
Something that spoke to us.
Yeah,
something God
something that
spoke.
spoke to us.
It wasn't a hey Dad, your sermon was so great, because it wasn't a bragging on the sermon. It
That
was
didn't work.
it was how did the Lord work on your heart? What did you get from the message?
It was practically applying Deuteronomy, what is it, 20, what is it?
6,
6,
7 through 9.
7 through 9. Practical application of, we were at church, and a big part of this was church isn't just church. Church comes home with you.
And
it's a part of, you talk about it when you're at home.
Yeah,
Something should
it
happen
taught
then.
you
Yeah.
when you're sitting there,
Pay
you
attention.
better listen to what's going on, because you know how many kids sit in church and just
Space
disconnected.
cadet, yeah.
It's like,
And-
and that forced us not to be.
The reason we did it on Sunday after church is because the best meal of the week, the best meal of
them
the week
rolls.
was after church Sunday afternoon, and nobody wanted to miss that. So if you didn't come to the table with how God spoke to you, you missed me. You missed a meal, and there wasn't a lot of them missed because
There was a lot of
they-
graciousness given because
Yeah.
it wasn't like we waxed eloquent.
Yeah,
And
Julie
a lot of
usually
times it was
stole
like,
mine, so.
yeah, I really like that. I mean, that was good too. You know,
And I think that
Took mine.
I think this whole thing just leads into what you're hearing through a theme is we communicated on all issues, all the issues of life. We wanted to talk about everything. So it didn't matter what it was. I either initiated it if I felt they were uncomfortable or looks like they were thinking something. There are times where you correct your kids and they get a look on their face like, you do that same thing. And you can tell they're digesting and struggling with having to obey when you yourself didn't do that or don't do that. Sometimes it is you're wrong. And sometimes it's a matter of perspective. It's not that you don't do it, is you're not doing it at the same time they are because they're kids and you're adults. And so that's a teaching opportunity. But communication was very important, and I always encouraged them to talk to us. Let me say this too. I always stressed on my wife, this was done on purpose. If the boys spent more time talking to them than talking to me, that would eventually be a problem and would lead to.
You mean the boys talking to mom more than dad?
If the
Yes.
boys talk to you more
Right.
than they talk to me,
Right.
because if any of our kids were afraid to talk to me, it usually was because I could quickly get to what was wrong and they knew that the problem was them. And moms are more compassionate and will explain and try to take it. And it's easier to take medicine with sugar than to just have the pill shoved down your throat. But it was an authority issue. And so sometimes I had to battle her and say, hey, send those kids to me. But communication was so important. And that's not just us and the kids, but it's my wife and I as well. Being on the same page was a necessity. It wasn't just let's perform in front of our kids and act like we're on the same page. We had to be on the same page. And
It's just so huge. I've seen so many times, even in pastors' families, where, mom is like, well, don't tell dad, or mom's over there, trying to keep things quiet, hush from dad. And you're always going to have a bad result from that. That's just.
Then associations. Obviously, because we were in the ministry and only one time I think we were a member of a church that offered more than two friends for them to choose from. Their associations were very much controlled. They probably noticed it the most when missionaries would come with children or pastors, or we went somewhere around other people. A lot of how we did things to protect our children not being influenced in the wrong way. We protected them from not just friends and other church members, but we also protect them from family. And unfortunately, our family members picked up on that and didn't like it, but they didn't understand. We don't have the same standards as you, and we don't think the same as you, and we don't have this negative attitude about things. So I wasn't putting my kids on the altar of sacrifice for them just because it was auntie or uncle and grandma or grandpa. I wanted to protect my kids' eyes and ears from things that weren't good. So associations, and that stretches from personal relationships to books to TV programs to music to, association was a big thing. Because you are who you are around. You become who you are around. And so trying to keep the right being.
And this one was really near and dear to my heart because to me, growing up, that was one of the hardest things, was the fact that everybody I was around 24/7, besides my family, mostly did not have the same standards that we had. And as a young person, that is just a really difficult stumbling block to get over. And I know when I looked at my kids, I said I never want them to feel like they're constantly in the minority. They're going to be in the minority. They're going to have to learn how to deal with that. You know, if you're living for God, you have to learn somewhat to be able to be lonely, have some self-confidence and be okay with that. But a constant diet of always being surrounded with everybody that is not going the same direction you are and expecting your kid to just,
And I'll tell you, where
be a good apple in a barrel of bad apples.
I'll tell you where Christian parents fail on that is they feel very compassionate that their kids need to learn to be sociable. Socialize and be sociable, and it starts from kindergarten. You know, why do you put kindergarten? Well, I want them to know how to play with other kids, you know, and I want them to have friends. Well, look at what we got now, Facebook, and so, you know, they don't even have real friends. It's all digital, and it's fake, and they're not capable. But having lines taught them how to build friendships with each other, and with the few people they could be around, they were meaningful relationships. And that also taught them how not to have friends, but to put the friendship with Jesus before anything else. He's the brother. He's the friend that sticketh closer than a brother, and we want them. Are you weary? Are you heavy-hearted? Tell it to Jesus. He's the friend, you know, that you want to have. And so, associations and controlling that was a big deal. I know there's a couple of times where my kids struggled. And I was disappointed, but they reached out to family members before they reached out to me. And I was never impressed with my family members because they never called me and said, I want you to know this. They never said to my kids, you need to call your dad. I'm going to call your dad. And I think that's a major breakdown. Not that I would not allow my kids to talk to other family members, but that's one of the reasons I did not allow my kids to just go with my their aunts, uncles, and grandma and grandpa, because they build a friendship that quickly transcends the natural mechanism of parenting. So on purpose, I put that divide. And
then sometimes people will say, well, then they won't have any idea how to act around people who don't believe the same. But that's not true either, because in our church setting of constantly being in ministry, bus ministry, things like that, they were around kids and people all the time constantly who did not believe the same.
Learn to be gracious and kind and
but
loving.
But it was what we call it ministry mode. And you know, it means you are not there for selfish reasons. You're not there to feed your own emotional needs and support. You are there to help them. Yeah. You're there to show them Jesus. And I don't know. And then, did you ever feel like when you went out in the world and got a job and stuff that you just like couldn't understand people because they were different than you? I mean, funny, because you would think growing up in the house that I grew up in, and in the church I grew up in the school I grew up in, that I wouldn't feel like that. But I did. When I went to work, I was like, I could barely have a conversation with them because it was just.
I do think it was also, our situation was a little bit unique.
We taught them why.
Too.
We didn't have that.
But we did a lot of traveling.
Yeah, it's true.
So although it wasn't a consistent socializing, like, you know, this is my best friend, I'm around him all the time. We had a lot of social interactions with a lot of different type of kids, a lot of different type of people since we were little. And I think that probably might be one reason. And also, I'll be honest, I think a big part of that is the bus ministry. I think you keep your kids involved in the bus ministry, and that'll give them, they'll see enough of the world to you know, they're not going to be weirdos. They're not going to be some homeschooled, you know, doesn't understand what the world's all about kind of. When you invest into people, when you're peering into the homes of these people that are broken, I mean, you just see life. And it does help. We had a dad who was very real, you know, came from the world.
So. And a lot of that's the next point is church. We kept church paramount because it did teach you all those things, and it emphasized and supported everything that we wanted you to be as a person, as a Christian. The essence of Christianity. Church was a place where you lived that. You lived it. You know, it was essential. You weren't just playing church. You were there to worship the Lord. You were there to walk with God, to get something, to provide a service to the church, to the Lord, to provide a handshake to someone who's needed it, a good word, a pat on the back, and a word of encouragement. It wasn't fake and it wasn't phony. We really wanted to be a help. And so church was epic. It was, we learned you learned, especially with me, how to eat from the table that was set before you, whether it's a bad sermon, a sermon that had many things to eat, sermons that didn't have hardly anything but a Q-tip, and you're just starving to death, but you still learned to eat, and took good messages, hard messages, and got something from it, and applied it to your life. Church is just a profound place for us to live out what we should be being taught in our home every single day. And Deuteronomy chapter 5 really emphasizes, 6 emphasizes our responsibilities as parents to on purpose make your home, to me, more powerful than church. Everybody knows that you can be saved, to be a member of the church, be saved and baptized. That's the 2 qualifications. Everything else is, you're being gracious. So if they're not dressed right, you're gracious. If they're not, you're gracious. It doesn't mean you don't teach the truth. And the leaders have to step it up to have, so there's some rules already. But for the most part, you're very, very gracious in church. But home, no. Home is a place where you need us. This is boot camp. Let's do this right. This is what we are. It's a matter of life and death. But church is important. Hebrews 10:25. I don't think the kids could live in a worldly enough life to ever drown that verse out of their head and take it literally for what it means. Mm-hmm. And then the last thing on my list is belongings. I hated it when I saw my girls wearing their sister's stuff, or the boys wearing. I wanted them to learn personal space. I wanted them to learn that if you were given a suit and tie by someone, they were thinking of you, and to just pass it off. Mm-hmm. To me you didn't quite really appreciate that. I wanted them to own it, be appreciative of it, take care of it. And then their rooms, I didn't allow the boys to just go in the girls' room and the girls to go in the boys' room. And the girls couldn't dig in and take each other's jewelry. And they did it anyway. All those things they did anyway, because kids do it anyway. And, I didn't like it when my girls borrowed my wife's clothes as they got older. And one of the reasons is, one time I put my arm around my sister-in-law, thinking it was my wife. It's the most embarrassing thing, but she was wearing my wife's top or something like that, and I got confused. And men, if you're paying attention to your wife's clothes, subconsciously, you're going to think, you got to be careful. So that's superficial, but I wanted them to have their own areas. At the same time, they own nothing. Nothing is theirs. Mm-hmm. I own it all. And if I want to take it away, I take it away. So they couldn't say, mine, that's mine, that's mine.
Or this thing of privacy,
Mm-hmm.
This is my private space, stay out. That's just
I found
real fallacy with kids. There is no private space.
Yeah, I never found bad CDs or records or 8-tracks or.
They hit them so good.
Yeah, I never found
8-tracks.
I never found bad magazines or even questionable pictures in my kids' house. The main reason is they knew that Dad was not respecting their area. Mm-hmm. That was Dad's area. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to go in there, and you better be sure that I was flipping up mattresses and taking books and open them up. You don't hide things from a man who's an ex-con. He knows where all the hiding places are. And besides that, God's supernatural. He sees everything you're doing. Be sure your sin will find you out. And there are many times where something like that's happened, and they were like, and they learn those lessons early in life. But you get what you inspect, not what you expect. So belongings to me is just teaching them to respect their area. I very seldom have a problem with. I don't know if anybody's gone through my truck. Any of my kids have. I don't have anything in there, so I don't worry about it. I don't have anything in my office they can't see, so I'm not worried about it. But generally, it's mutual respect, and so those are some things that we've taught our kids. Is there anything else that you can think of? We need to go.
A million and one things, but
we
we
need
have
to go-
covered a lot.
We need to go on to the song, Will, right, and then get into what was the last segment?
The third degree.
Yeah,
Send
give
us
it-
your questions.
Give us the third degree.
Give us a couple of questions to finish things out with. We want to finish quickly here, but we do still want to answer any questions that you may have. So you can send those to us in the chat or 920-940-8275. The next song, Serve Him Now. Our Father's 4. We'll be right back. Welcome to the segment where we answer your questions, no matter how difficult they may be. Have at it. Give us the third degree. We have no questions.
We covered it all. We put them all to sleep.
No, they're all still here. Still
Yes,
with
they
us.
stuck with us. We're the best audience ever.
I have a question. It's more of a devil's advocate question than it is a issue that for me. But what would you say to someone out there who says, "Well, you know, effectively, my wife wears the pants. My wife is the disciplinarian or whatever, and I'm just the fun guy." What would you say to that?
I would say that's biblically wrong. That if you look in Proverbs, and really all throughout the Bible, all discipline has fallen to the authority of the house. It's obey your father and mother, fathers first. And so when a man shirks his responsibility and says, "I just am the fun guy," he's just saying he's lazy and doesn't want to do what God told him to do. Discipline doesn't work. Teaching, training doesn't work if it doesn't start with the dad. Now, I understand we have single parent homes where just mom's raising the kids. And that's why church is important, to get kids around deacons, men in the church, and don't get offended if they assist you and help you a little bit in telling your kid to behave. There's nothing wrong with that. But you'll raise a kid, a boy, who will not be strong if it's all okay. The difference between a boy being nagged and a man being nagged is no difference. He's just a little man. And so if he grows up his whole life carrying, good night, that'll drive him to rebellion every single time. So, I think the man needs to realize that he's called and given the responsibility to be the leader.
And I think when that a wife and a mom can help a lot in that situation if as we're dealing with the children and we notice a spirit of resistance in them. I think I noticed it, with my boys more than I did my girls. About age 10, 11, 12, they start, you're talking to them and they kind of just have that little bit of that man spirit welling up in them. I would send them to their dad. I would enlist their dad. I'd say, look, they're close to being a teenager. They're looking at me and they're getting their back up, and I need a man. I need you to have, not that I had to tell you to do it or ask you to do it, but I'm just saying.
The thing is,
women can help.
it's a fallacy, JT, and here's why. In my home, when I came home from work and the kids were with mom all day, and I walked through the door, mom was relieved because the kids instantly behaved better. Instantly. Why? Because they knew I'd kill them. But you asked the kids who had fun. If everything was good, Dad was fun. We had a good time. I'm the one wrestling on the floor, not Mom. I'm taking them out, teaching them how to graffiti things. Mom's not. We're taking the hoods of old vehicles and pulling them behind the family minivan on the snow. Mom's not doing that. Dad was the fun one, and I tried to be fun, but I didn't put up with any garbage, and I took my responsibility seriously.
And I do think when we've just talked about that this week, we talked about how when different personalities get married, so sometimes you have a more aggressive type A personality woman with a more mild mannered, easygoing guy. And that tends to be more, when that kind of thing happens, JT, where it naturally, if you're just going by personality, the wife is more aggressive. And, in that case, both of them just have to really work. They have strengths with those personalities that are very godly, but they have weaknesses of their personalities that they have to work on. Same as really anybody. But in that case, in parenting, I think it's really important that they both understand what their weaknesses are and both help each other be in their God-given role.
I think there's nothing more damaging to a home, a family, than an absentee dad. The girls, they need a dad. Jill said when she was young, if she needed a hug, she would crawl up on her dad's lap and just get the hug. Debbie, her sister, was different. She was waiting for Dad to come give her a hug. And Dad was just different. So, whereas I am watching my kids all the time, and I can tell when they're needing it. And I give it, and I go, I encourage it. Not a hug or crawl up on my lap necessarily, I just watch my kids. And a lot of dads feel they're too busy to actually be involved with the emotional baggage of their children. I'm the one who's tasked with the responsibility of helping them sort those things out. So.
And when you get into the teenage years, to me, that's what you're doing a lot of the time, is you're being willing to get into their emotional world. And you can't just dismiss it and be like, you'll grow out of it.
You'll see more damage done in bigger homes. Less damage is seen when there's fewer kids on the outside, but you see a lot more damage done when you get into 6, 7 kids or 5 kids. Usually 1 or 2. Generally, you won't see the damage till later in their lives. You'll see it reflected in their child rearing. That's where the damage gets worse. All right.
Did have another question. Courtney asked, how do you teach children the difference between having constructive criticism and just being critical?
Are you being critical, Courtney?
That's a good question.
Well, I think there's no formula that I'm just going to lay out for you, but I will tell you this. In my assessment, how we have done it, it solves the problem. Communication on everything, on all issues, teaches you the difference between just being critical and then reaching to try to correct something. If you're talking about corrective criticism, let me see if I can correct my parents and say, but it's just corrective criticism. That's where fellowship corrects leaders. That's never right. So corrective criticism is bad. But if I'm looking at my son and I'm being critical of him, that's corrective criticism. It doesn't have to. I don't have to say, "Hey, I'm this is for you." No, all criticism is corrective when it goes downwards. If you're just talking about nagging and nitpicking, obviously that's bad.
I think she's more talking about constructive criticism, which the difference between just being like, criticizing somebody just because, or talking about the things that are wrong in their life to your kids without them losing respect for that individual.
So more like gossiping,
How do you, so there are individuals growing up when we travel, we'd always talk about the churches that we went from, or that we went to, and then we left and be like, and it wasn't so much tearing down the church or the pastor, but we understood that. But you talked about, man, did you see this? Did you see this? Did you see this? Did you see this? And it wasn't just to say it just because you were trying to criticize, but at the same time, you were pointing out those things that were wrong, which allowed us in our minds to see and to connect the dots between what we saw with Bible principles and why it was wrong. But at the same time, we were expected to still respect those
So,
people.
Corrective criticism is correcting something in me.
Constructive.
Right. I was getting to that.
Oh, okay.
I said corrective criticism is correcting someone.
Mm-hmm.
Constructive is taking that person and teaching them, hey, look, there's something in your life, and we need to, change that so you build something better. So, we're building. So construction actually means to build.
Right.
And I echo again, if you are teaching your kids, you're being constructive. I guess a critical criticism would be the opposite of constructive. So that's why I went to critical and didn't go in constructive, because we want to me, when you talked about constructive criticism, what you really want to talk about is critical criticism, being critical of someone. And because all teaching is constructive if you're doing it for the right reason. Now, if you want to know how you balance it so your kid doesn't think all you're doing is ragging on everybody, you say it and be done with it. You have discussion and be done with it. You don't build a relationship between you and your kid and talking about a person. Like, yeah. It's not you and your kid against the world. But all teaching is constructive criticism. All of it is.
I think a lot of it too was principles. Wasn't when you said this before? Talk about principles, not people. When we leave a church, this is just an example. Wouldn't be about, man, did you see the tie that preacher was wearing? Although sometimes we've seen some crazy ties. It was, man, you think about this. Well, where in the Bible do we see, and there would be that constructive criticism teaching us, but teaching us to be paying attention, while at the same time not undercutting the position or that church, and that pastor's going to do it the way he's going to do it.
And there was always that in those conversations. There were times where there would tend to be leaning towards an attack on the person. And I thought, well, hold on a minute, that's the pastor. He does things the way he wants to do it, and we would rein that back in. So there was a balance in that, and we left room for correction if it went too far. But it's up to the parent to always be watching, but not to be afraid to engage in criticism because you're afraid the kid's not going to understand.
Yeah, one of the things that I think kind of helps me when I, in discussing topics like this, and I think I got this a lot from you, Hun, is when we use, so the word like criticism, it's not in the Bible. So then it becomes down to the interpretation of what you or I mean about criticism. But when you use Bible terms, then that does really help you, because then you can back it up with Bible principles that you know in your head. So if you're talking about correction, instruction, edifying or rebuking or reproving, or are you talking about slander or scorning or scoffing or mocking? So those are all Bible words. Right. So I think when you have discussions even with your kids, and even answering that's a good question, but when you think about it, taking that question back off the shelf, putting it in Bible terms, and then putting it back on, really a lot of times can answer your own question, because then you're using Bible words that you can actually draw right back to verses.
I think probably a synonymous term, biblical term for corrective criticism would be prudence. A prudent man foreseeth the evil and hideth himself.
Yes. Look to the ant, thou sluggard. And so using illustrations and even looking at other people, us kids' families, and saying, look at that.
That's a constant breakdown in our movement when we reach outside of biblical terms. It just takes the pressure off of individual responsibility to handle things properly. So using biblical terms is not running someone down. It's actually giving correction that needs to be, and it is teaching or warning.
Or you're catching your child. If it's your child you're trying to teach, you're making your child define why they're talking about whatever they're talking about.
But
Are
the
they
worst
just trying to
thing,
be,
worst
you
thing
know?
can happen in the home, and I think we find this in the IFB. People who are sincere Christians have bought into the critical construction, constructive criticism, and critical criticism, and so they just stay away from anything. They don't say anything. The worst thing in the world is not say
I
anything.
think you have to be positive always.
Yeah,
This Disneyland, everything is wonderful.
yeah.
And if you say a negative word, you're not being a good
You have a
Christian.
bad disposition.
Right. And that's way off. That's
You lose your position
doesn't even
and your
sound like Jesus if you read the
disposition.
Gospels.
Yeah. So it's definitely something that I think if your home is filled with communication, proper communication, you'll work through those things, and the construction and the critical will take its place properly biblically, and will solve the issues. Stay away from scorning, making fun. You can't blame that preacher. Good night. He can't preach his way out of a wet paper bag. I don't say that. I just say, well, he served it up different, but our job's to eat from that table, So, I don't know if that helps. Anybody else?
there's a couple more.
What?
Mrs. Bennett asked, how do you correct raising your children up in IFB, but you didn't learn parenting on purpose, like what we heard today? So,
It depends on the age of the children. If you're a young parent, I'm a picture of success. So it can be done. You just have to lean very hard on Bible principles, and having faith that whatever's penned in the Word of God is true and would never contradict something else written in the Word of God. And if it seems like it did, you do Bible study, because you'll find an instance where God says, here's the balance. Here's how it works. When you're older and your kids are out of your house, you eat humble pie a lot, and you stay faithful to what you have taught, because that your teaching is wrapped up in your living. And the last thing I would say is learn to control your tongue. That's what do you think, Jill?
Yeah, I think a lot of, obviously I'm speaking from not experience in this, since I did grow up in a Christian home, but I can't forget what I was going with that.
Okay.
But, just that you have to work on yourself. You can only teach your children to be a good Christian if you're a good Christian. And if you are learning to be a good Christian, and you can teach your children what you are learning, how to be a good Christian, it's all the same steps, whether it's a child or an adult.
Yeah. I think about young families. They got kids. This is a whole new transition. They just got saved, and just in the last couple of years or whatever, and they're bringing their family into church. And the kids are young, and they're learning. The kids have such an advantage, because those parents have to be careful that when you go home, that their children are not hearing you have preacher stew. Well, I don't know. And when you're older and you're in the same church and your grown-up kids are coming home and all they hear about is what kind of problem you had with the pastor, you're never going to gain ground with your own children. You just won't. They'll never respect you. What's that next? Help.
And the next one is, if one child is struggling in an area and the siblings are seeing everything play out, what are some ways you can balance giving the one struggling help and counsel while also teaching the kids who are in the same home watching it?
You blame them for it.
She said, sorry, that was a mess.
You blame the older kid for everything wrong that the younger kids do. You hold them responsible. Well, I don't blame them, but you hold them responsible to see it and report it, to be an extension of the parents' hands, and question them on what's the best way to handle it. And you can sometimes involve the older one in the correction of the younger ones. I don't know specifically exactly what you're referring to, but am I missing the concept of the question?
I don't know if she's saying like, how do you balance helping the kids that need the attention because they're struggling, while also helping the kids that quote unquote don't need that same attention.
Right. I think that's kind of what she's saying.
I
In other
think
words, your
my
focus
answer
is on the one
was-
who's doing wrong, but
My answer was pretty much you're helping them by letting them see. There's no privacy in our house. You knew when there's somebody else in the house was in trouble, and we didn't hide that. If my wife is hiding from me when the kids do wrong, I can't help the kids. And if I'm saying that you have a right as an individual that your sin not be paraded in front of everybody else, then that opportunity I have to solve that problem in front of everybody is taken away, and they can't be helped. So that means I'm going to be doing more correcting. That's almost just easier. Let me correct you. Are you listening? And you know what I'm saying? We don't do that around here. Our kids don't act that way. And
the older the kids get in their teenage years or even young adulthood, the more serious their transgressions can get. And it does sometimes involve not only dealing with the one who's struggling, but then going to the ones who aren't at the moment and being able to help them process through.
And it's
Whether
not
they're
just-
the older sibling, younger sibling.
And it's not just what they did wrong, what the other kid did wrong. It's helping that child understand, now let's be an encouragement. Let's help them. And honestly, some kids feel the weight of having to carry all of that.
Oldest kids more. This
Yeah,
is the
that
oldest
they
kid
feel
question.
they feel like,
Responsible.
responsible. And I think they just need to be taught that depending on your role, in other words, your first, second, third, fourth, whatever your role is, that those weights are natural, and just to embrace them. Don't be prideful and demand it from them, but understand that that's, in essence, in the long run, you won't hear this right now when they're growing up, but later when they're married and they're thinking about it, they're going to come back to you and say, man, I'm glad you held the fort on that. That really helped me to see some things. And you're the only one that'll clip the coupons on that one.
Yeah,
So.
every kid has their struggles, whether they're the open struggles because someone's doing something that's wrong that everybody sees and they get in trouble for, or they get caught doing something, or the kid that seems to be doing everything right but they're struggling in their heart with other things. So everybody is struggling in one way or the other, and the story of the prodigal son is exactly that. You've got the kid running away, coming back, having a party, and the kid who wasn't doing anything wrong, obviously they're not children, but struggling with the fact that I've done what's right, and just having that struggle of having to process through, and all of those processes are normal and need addressed.
Let me ask you, boys. In our house, do you feel like you had more good days than bad days when it comes to discipline? In other words, do you feel like you got beat every day? That dad was all the time? Do you feel like you had more good days or more bad days?
More good days, yeah.
Because that's what I wanted to give my kids. I felt like I had more bad days than good days. I mean, it's constant chaos, and discipline was so whacked. When it was supposed to be there, it wasn't. When it wasn't supposed to be there, it was. And didn't talk to anybody. Couldn't talk to anybody in my house. Talked to my sister. And it's just that wasn't there. So I just wanted to provide a home where you did have discipline, but you had more to be thankful for than you did not want it. I know we need to shut down, so go ahead, Platte.
We want to thank you for joining us for this week's episode of The Brook here on Canaan Radio. The last week's episode is available as a podcast everywhere that podcasts can be listened to. It's also available on YouTube. The video version, so you can check that out. You make sure that if you join us today on YouTube that you like and subscribe to the YouTube channel to get notified. Make sure you click the bell, get notified whenever we go live. And we're going to try and start going live on Facebook and Instagram each week. We'll see how that goes and if it even matters. If not, we'll just stick with YouTube and our faithful few. But for now, we're going to go ahead and sign off. I do want to say thank you to Brother David, Pastor,
Hello.
Mrs. Reeves,
It was a blessing.
Peter up in the booth, who didn't get to say much, and JT running everything. We want to go ahead and finish off today with a song. We're going to head out with We Will Carry the Torch by Fundamental Difference. We will see you again next week. Have a good night.